Ships and signals carry stories that never end, from ghost liners drifting alone to voices breaking into radio static. The sea and the airwaves hold mysteries that no one has fully explained. These are records of real events told as they were found, where fact and legend overlap. Mary Celeste, 1872. The wind lashes at the sails as the Mary Celeste leaves New York Harbor on November 7, 1872. She carries her cargo, more than 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, bound for Genoa. On board are Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and a crew of 7 experienced seamen. The brigantine of 282 tons is well provisioned and prepared for the long Atlantic crossing. In the first weeks, the Mary Celeste faces rough seas. Gales delay progress, winds shift suddenly, and heavy weather strains her rigging. The logbook entries record a cautious journey. On November 25th, the captain notes their position off the island of Santa Maria in the Azores. All seems routine, that is the last entry. On the nautical map, the course lies eastward and then southeast toward the Strait of Gibraltar. The crew would have to navigate around islands, avoiding shoals hidden beneath the water, reading current sets, and adjusting to unpredictable swells. In the open Atlantic, every decision matters. Small errors or sudden storms can mean the difference between progress and disaster. 10 days later, another brigantine, the Canadian vessel DEI Gratia, under Captain David Morehouse, sights a ship adrift some 400 nautical miles east of the Azores. The sails are partly set, but she moves unsteadily, as if with no hand at the wheel. No one answers signals, no one stands on deck. Morehouse sends his first mate Oliver DeVoe and second mate John Wright with a boarding party. They climb over the rail and the name on the stern becomes clear: Mary Celeste. The silence is unsettling. The hatches are open, the lifeboat is gone, and ropes dangle slackly. The glass cover of the ship's compass is shattered. In the hold they find about 3.5 feet of water, but the hull is sound and the ship remains seaworthy. Below deck, the scene is domestic and eerie. Cabins show no signs of struggle. Clothing and belongings lie undisturbed. The galley is orderly, no meal on the stove. Provisions are abundant, enough food and water for months. 9 barrels of alcohol are empty, but the rest of the cargo is intact. In the mate's cabin, the logbook ends abruptly with the final entry on November 25th. Some navigational instruments and the ship's papers are missing. The sextant is gone, and the chronometer may have been removed. Charts are not aboard. The lifeboat ropes appear to have been cut, not simply untied. Later reports suggested cuts on the bow and possible stains on the rails, though tests could never confirm them as blood. From the perspective of drift and current, investigators later estimated that if the ship was abandoned near Santa Maria, she could have floated hundreds of miles before being sighted. Winds and sea state might have driven her off course, but she remained intact, capable of being sailed. Captain Morehouse makes a difficult decision. He divides his small crew, sending some to sail the Mary Celeste while he commands the DEI Gracia. They bring both ships to Gibraltar, a demanding task for undermanned sailors. On December 13th they arrive. The local Vice Admiralty Court opens an inquiry. In the hearings, speculation runs wild. Was it piracy, mutiny, insurance fraud, or some accident at sea? A survey of the ship finds no conclusive evidence of violence. The cut marks may not mean anything sinister. Claims of blood prove unreliable under testings. Captain Briggs has a strong reputation as a devout and trustworthy man. His crew were competent and had no record of trouble. One theory grows stronger than the others: the cargo itself. Alcohol vapours may have leaked from the barrels. These fumes could create explosive pressure inside the hold. Even a small blast leaving no scorch marks might terrify the crew. In fear of the ship catching fire, they could launch the lifeboat temporarily, perhaps tying it to the Mary Celeste. If the rope parted or came loose, the yawl would drift away, leaving the brigantine behind. Modern experiments show that alcohol vapour can ignite in bursts without leaving evidence of burning, supporting this possibility. Other explanations focus on natural hazards. Some believe a waterspout struck the vessel, drenching the decks and causing the crew to think she was flooding. Others argue the ship drifted dangerously close to the Dolabrat Reef off the Azores, prompting a rushed evacuation. But the ship was found intact, with sails partly furled, suggesting she had not struck rocks. Investigators also considered a problem with the bilge pumps. If the crew believed water levels were rising faster than they were, Perhaps due to a faulty sounding rod or broken pump, they could have panicked. Taking to the lifeboat seemed safer than staying aboard a ship they thought was sinking. But the evidence remained inconclusive. In the end, the Gibraltar court released the vessel and awarded the salvors a prize. The amount, however, was modest, reflecting suspicion that foul play might have occurred. No one could prove it, and no charges were brought. Afterwards, the Mary Celeste returned to service. But she carried a shadowed reputation. Owners changed hands several times. In 1885, her story ended in scandal when she was deliberately run aground off Haiti in an attempted insurance fraud. The wreck was a final disgrace for a ship already famous for mystery. The Mary Celeste's legend only grew. In the years that followed, newspapers exaggerated details. Writers invented plots of murder and madness. Arthur Conan Doyle even wrote a short story that fictionalized the event, renaming the ship and spreading confusion. From that point on, the mistaken title Marie Celeste entered popular use. Yet the original case is well documented. A real ship, a real crew, and a real discovery in the open Atlantic. The facts are clear. A seaworthy vessel was found abandoned, cargo intact, with no definitive reason why her people left. The map of the Atlantic remains open. Currents, storm tracks, and human error all offer pieces of the puzzle. But none can explain why Captain Briggs, his family, and 7 sailors disappeared without a trace, leaving the Mary Celeste to drift silently on the empty sea. Carroll A. Deering, 1921. Not far off the coast of North Carolina, in late January 1921, a 5-masted schooner looms out of the storm shadow. She's the Carroll A. Deering, built only 2 years before, strong and gliding across Atlantic trade routes. Yet by the end of January, she would become one of America's greatest maritime enigmas. The Deering's final voyage begins in July 1920. She departs Puerto Rico, heads to Newport News, Virginia, loads coal bound for Rio de Janeiro. Aboard, Captain William Merritt, First Mate Sewell Merritt, and a crew largely of Scandinavian sailors. But early into the trip, Captain Merritt falls ill, and the schooner turns back to drop him off. The company quickly replaces the captain with Willis B. Wormel, an experienced but older veteran. The ship resumes, laden with coal, making its way towards Brazil. In January 1921, things take a strange turn. On January 28th, the Deering passes the Cape Lookout lightship, about 85 miles south of Hatteras. A man aboard calls across via megaphone to the lightship keeper. They claim to have lost 2 anchors in a storm and ask that their owners be notified. The keeper notes odd behaviour aboard, crew milling on the quarterdeck, in spaces typically reserved for officers. The radio aboard the lightship is broken, so no message is passed on immediately. 2 days later, on the afternoon of January 30th, a passing steamer sees a schooner under sail heading directly toward Diamond Shoals. The crew of that steamer sees no one on deck. They do not hail, expecting the schooner's crew to adjust course once they spot the Hatteras light or avoid the shoals. But no visible movement comes. At dawn on January 31st, a surfman on watch at Cape Hatteras spots a ship hard aground on Diamond Shoals. It is the Deering. Her sails are set full against the wind, but she lies stranded in treacherous shoals known for devouring vessels in the graveyard of the Atlantic. Rescue attempts are immediately launched, but heavy surf bars access. The vessel remains out of reach for days. Once boarding is possible, around February 4th, Coast Guard teams climb aboard to find the ship completely deserted. No crew remains, the lifeboats are missing, the wheel is shattered, the binnacle box is stove in, and the rudder is detached. All the navigation instruments, chronometer, sextant, logbook, charts, have vanished. The cabins are in disarray. In the galley, some food appears to have been prepared but untouched. A lonely cat, or in some accounts 3, is found alive on board. From a map room perspective, the Deering drift and movement raise difficult questions. Why, having lost anchors, was she still underway? Why set a course toward known hazards? Did the crew lose control of navigation? Once grounded, why abandon a large intact schooner? The position makes little sense unless something went very wrong, sudden or sharp. In official hearings, multiple US agencies combined forces. Commerce, Justice, Treasury, State, Navy all probe. Herbert Hoover, then head of Commerce, takes special interest. Investigators examine weather records, inquiry reports, lightship logs, shipping traffic, hurricane paths. They note that several other ships disappear in the same general era, including the SS Hewitt. But most of those losses are linked to storms. The Deering and Hewitt were sailing rather away from known hurricanes when lost. Among the theories, hurricane or rogue storm. But critics argue that the condition of the Deering, sails set, intact hull, no signs of smashing into reefs, suggests an orderliness inconsistent with a violent storm. Others propose mutiny or piracy. One official, Captain O.W. Parker, voices, "Piracy without a doubt still exists. The missing instruments and lifeboats could point to foul action. Then there is the notorious message in a bottle." In April 1921, a fisherman in Buxton claims he found a bottle containing a typed message. Deering captured by oil-burning boat something like chaser, taking off everything, handcuffing crew. Crew hiding all over ship, no chance to make escape. Finder please notify headquarters Deering. The handwriting is later identified by Captain Wormel's widow as her husband's engineers. The bottle is proven manufactured in Brazil. This suggests a hostile boarding. But on closer inspection it unravels. Handwriting experts and later interrogations reveal the message was likely forged by the fisherman himself. He admits he hoped the drama would help him gain employment. Archive sleuths also flag discrepancies. Why write to the shipping company rather than to the US government or Coast Guard? Why a typed rather than a handwritten letter? Why time the bottle release weeks later? The entire drama seems too theatrical, too staged. Another hypothesis surfaces. The crew may have concluded the ship was unseaworthy or damaged, decided to abandon ship in lifeboats, only to be lost at sea. The hull might have taken damage from grounding or stress, prompting fear of sinking. But if so, why leave an intact large vessel? Also, no trace of lifeboats or survivors or wreckage is ever found. Some think the crew may have been taken by another vessel in the area, stolen off. A steamer that ignored the message from the Deering could have been complicit, but no steamer is ever reliably identified. Of dozens of ships passing in those waters at the time, none is confirmed to have been on the ill-fated path. Later researchers consider organised smuggling or rum-running schemes. The early 1920s sees illegal trade in alcohol. Perhaps someone commandeered the crew for illicit service. If that were so, instruments and logs might be deliberately removed to erase evidence. But no conclusive proof emerges. Despite months of investigation extending into 1922, no official cause is ever declared. The file is closed. The ship remains a caution, a phantom of the shoals. In the years that follow, folklore fills the gaps. Ghostly accounts emerge along Hatteras Island. Locals whisper that on storm nights you can see the sails of the Deering lit faintly beyond the breakers, that sailors report strange lights near Diamond Shoals, hear voices in the wind, feel a presence at the edge of their sonar screens. But these remain unverified stories. Over time, parts of the wreck break free, wood drifts ashore, some residents salvage timbers for buildings. In March 1921, the Coast Guard decides the wreck is a navigation hazard and destroys what remains with explosives. Even so, fragments linger on the shoals for decades. When books and newspapers recount the mystery, they often embellish. Some claim evidence suppressed, conspiracies staged, or that the Deering vanished because the crew deserted into some underwater base. Serious historians push back, returning us to the archive. Logs, lightship transcripts, Coast Guard reports, agency correspondence. Investigators continue to plot probable paths on charts, overlay wind logs, simulate drift, compare hull stress models. None produce a satisfying singular answer. The map room remains open, the archive silent. No final verdict emerges. The crew of the Carol A. Deering disappear into the sea without trace, leaving behind a vessel grounded, instruments gone, lifeboats absent. A ghost ship of the shoals, MV Joyita, 1955. At dawn on October 3rd, 1955, the MV Joyita slips quietly from Apia Harbour, Samoa. The sea is calm, the world assumes this will be a routine crossing. She's bound for the Tokelau Islands, about 270 miles away. On board, 16 crew and 9 passengers, including a doctor, government official, children and traders. Her manifest lists medical supplies, timber, foodstuffs and 80 empty oil drums. The Joyita was already imperfect for such a voyage. The day before departure, her port engine's clutch failed. Nevertheless, Captain Thomas Dusty Miller elects to sail using only the one remaining engine. Without a fully operational engine pair, redundancy is gone, the ship is now vulnerable. As night falls on the second evening, something changes. No distress signal ever reaches land. The vessel vanishes from scheduled arrival. On October 6th, the Tokelau port reports are overdue. Search aircraft sweep nearly 100,000 square miles. Nothing, no sign, no debris, no trace, until more than 5 weeks later. On November 10th, the merchant ship Tuvalu spots her. Far off course, more than 600 miles west of where she should have been, the Joyita drifts listless. She is partly submerged, port rail awash. The bridge structure is damaged, windows broken. The air is silent. No one answers hail. No one stands on deck. Boarding parties reach her and begin the grim inventory. The hull remains intact. Despite flooding in lower decks, she still floats, thanks to built-in buoyancy. No one on board. The lifeboats, 3 Kali rafts and a dinghy are missing. Navigation instruments, logbook, charts, even the sextant and chronometer, all gone. The radio is tuned to 2182 kHz, the international distress frequency, but it cannot transmit. A break in the antenna cable has been concealed, painted over, rendering the radio nearly useless. Inside, the atmosphere is chilling. A doctor's bag lies on deck, a stethoscope, a scalpel, 4 lengths of blood-stained bandages. The clocks on board, electrical ones tied to the generator, have stopped at exactly 10:25 p.m. Cabin lighting and navigation light switches are left in the on position. The starboard engine is hidden beneath mattresses. The port engine clutch is partially disassembled, left inoperable. An auxiliary pump has been jury-rigged in the engine room, mounted on a plank slung between the 2 main engines, yet it was never connected. From the forensic autopsy perspective, each of these clues demands scrutiny. The leak is first. Investigators find corrosion in a cooling pipe in the raw water circuit. That crack allowed ingress of seawater into the bilge. Because the Joyita lacks watertight bulkheads or subdivisions, water steadily filled her lower decks. The bilge pumps, moreover, lacked strainers and had become clogged with debris. They failed. The flooding would have advanced mercilessly, but the ship's hull, lined with cork and reinforced by her cargo of empty oil drums, made her nearly unsinkable. Even partly flooded, she would ride high, refusing to go under. The very thing that should have been her safety becomes a puzzle. Why abandon her if she remained afloat? Moving to the engines, the starboard engine was incapacitated, disassembled. The port engine, though intact, was burdened and struggling to push a pitchside list. The mattress covering may have been a desperate attempt to moderate spray or insulate electrical panels. But control is lost. The ship, listing heavily, cannot respond properly to helm inputs. A swell, beam-on tilts her further. Then there is radio silence. The break in the antenna line, painted over, suggests someone knew in advance to disable long-distance transmission. The crew would have had no reliable way to call for help beyond 2 miles. In mid-Pacific at night, that limit is meaningless. In the medical kit lies bloodstains. Who was hurt? Did someone bleed? Could an injured captain lead to panic? The vessel has a doctor aboard, Dr. Alfred Dennis Parsons. The presence of blood implies trauma or surgery, but no body is found. The medical bag offers no answers, only unsettling hints. On the chart of Joyita's drift, analysts plot possible paths. Given fuel used and tank readings, it is estimated she made 243 miles before abandoning ship, likely within 50 miles of Tokelau before systems failed. The ship drifted from there, adrift until discovery near Fiji waters. Barnacle growth above the usual waterline, especially on the port side, confirms she had been in a stable list for weeks. From radio logs, there is silence. No station reports receiving distress. No passing vessel logs hearing the Joyita. The break in transmission means any distress may never have been heard beyond local vicinity. The tangled forensic record leaves many unknowns. Why would an experienced captain abandon a floating craft, especially when she was not going down? Why leave behind fuel? Still plenty in the tanks. Why not repair the minor leak or isolate the flooding compartment? Why dismantle instruments and carry them in life rafts into the dark? Investigators at the inquest, held in Apia in February 1956, describe the vessel's state as in poor repair. They term the disappearance inexplicable on the evidence submitted. The physical record admits failure. The cooling pipe, clogged pumps, lack of watertight integrity, unsound radio wiring. but none explain the human decision to leave. From the archive viewpoint, many contemporary reports advance theories. Some suggest captain incapacitation. Perhaps Miller or a crewman was seriously hurt or killed, prompting panic. Then the remaining occupants, fearing imminent sinking, abandoned ship in life rafts, carrying logs and instruments away. But if that happened, why leave ropes trailing, leaving cargo behind, and abandon the one floating structure that could keep them alive longer? Another idea: piracy or seizure. In the early mid-1950s Pacific, rumours swirled of Japanese fishing fleets or covert Soviet operations. Newspapers speculated that Yoita passed through a fleet of Japanese vessels, saw something they shouldn't, was boarded, crew taken. Knives stamped "Made in Japan" were found, but tests show they were old, likely aboard from fishing trips. The sabotage theory always collapses under scrutiny. Mutiny is also proposed. Tension may have existed between Captain Miller and his American first mate Simpson. Perhaps conflict escalated, someone offed the captain, and remaining crew left in panic. But no bodies, no struggle marks, no weapons found. Insurance fraud is floated, but seems unlikely. Scuttling the ship would require opening seacocks, but investigators found no signs of intentional underwater openings. Also, Oita was famously unsinkable. To stage a disappearance would be nearly impossible. Some reports suggest a collision or submarine encountering Yoita, yet no wreck or external damage is consistent with that. The superstructure damage is minor, not consistent with major collision. The medical kit itself sits hauntingly on deck. A bag full of tools, bandages stained, but no operator, no patient. Did the doctor treat someone before disappearance? Did blood indicate fatal wounds, or simply first aid? The evidence is silent. The maproom overlay of Yoita's route, flooding rate, drift, battery life, fuel consumption, it all yields possible corridors of abandonment, but none cohere into a confident narrative. The absence of survivors, the intact hull, missing lifeboats, disabled radio, removed instruments, it's a catalogue of strangely aligned failures and human decisions. The Yoita continues to haunt maritime history, a vessel adrift where no one remains, offering technical clues but no human answers. The sea holds its silence, and the records only deepen the mystery. SS Beichimo, abandoned in 1931. The Arctic wind howls across a blanket of sea ice, and somewhere ahead a hulking silhouette drifts stubborn, silent. It is the SS Beichimo, known to some as the Arctic's ghost freighter, a ship that refused the grave and roved the polar wastes for decades. She began life in 1914 as Anger Manelfen, built in Gothenburg, Sweden, a steel-hulled cargo steamer of about 1,322 tons. After World War I, she was transferred to the Hudson's Bay Company, renamed Beichimo, and pressed into service along the treacherous frozen coasts of northern Canada and Alaska, delivering goods and exchanging for furs among Inuit communities. For years she laboured quietly in ice, carrying pelts, supplies, trade goods, and hope to remote outposts. Her hull was built to wear ice, but not forever. In October 1931, entering Arctic waters near Barrow, Alaska, she became beset in pack ice. The crew attempted to free her, but the ice closed in tight. She was stranded. On October 1st, 1931, her officers and 37 crew tried to break free. When that failed, they abandoned her temporarily, going ashore to wait out the freeze near Barrow. By October 8th, she freed herself briefly, only to be trapped again. The Hudson's Bay Company sent aircraft to evacuate 22 of the crew in mid-October. 15 men remained along with the captain, preparing for a long winter if needed. Storms battered the site. On November 24th, a fierce blizzard raged. When it cleared, the crew returned to the ice floe and found Beichimo gone. The captain assumed she'd broken apart and sank during the storm. But soon, Inuit hunters reported seeing her drifting some 45 miles away, lodged again in ice. The crew followed via sled and recovered valuable furs, then left her behind, abandoning the vessel completely. Thus the Beichimo became a ghost, a ship adrift and unmanned, yet still afloat. She slipped free of her ice prison, and for nearly 40 years afterward she reappeared again and again across the Arctic seas. In the decades that followed, the Beichimo became the Arctic itself incarnate, a presence on the ice, moving with the floes, appearing then vanishing, resisting capture. She was boarded by travellers, hunters, explorers, but never successfully reclaimed. One of the earliest post-abandonment sightings, in 1932 a man named Leslie Melvin, travelling by dog sled from Herschel Island to Nome, saw a dark shape ahead along the coast of the Beaufort Sea. It was her, still afloat, frozen in ice, silent. He boarded, noted some scattered furs, though much was spoiled. In March 1933, Inuit settlers came across her and tried to shelter aboard during a storm, becoming trapped for days. They reported interior furnishings rotting, hull plating cold, rafters cracked, but the ship still held form. In August of that same year, a schooner named Trader, with botanist and writer Isabel Wiley Hutchison aboard, sighted the Bachimo 12 miles off Wainwright. She described the ship as she floated against an ice bank, her hull rusting, her frame silent as a tomb. The Trader crew attempted to tow or board, but the ice and weather forced them off. Over the years, 1935, 1939, early 1940s, more sightings surfaced. Captain Hugh Polson, in 1939, approached the ship in ice and tried salvage. But creeping floes, shifting winds, and brutal cold forced him to abandon the attempt. At every turn, the Bachimo seemed to elude persistence. In 1962, Inuit observers tracked her drifting along the Beaufort Sea coast. She was still afloat, still hers but without life, and in 1969, at least the last documented sighting, she was spotted between Icy Cape and Point Barrow, lodged in a pack of ice, silent and unmanned. No further confirmed accounts exist beyond then. From the map room's vantage, the Bachimo's drift path is astonishing. She lies not in one region but across decades, following pack ice currents as they shift with seasons. She's carried by drift in Beaufort waters eastward, westward, sometimes creeping south or north. She becomes part of the ice itself, merging with flows, appearing only when currents deliver her to a vantage point. Blocks of drift ice, pressure ridges, seasonal melt zones, all act as her roadways. In some years she arrived near the Alaskan coast, in others far east near Canadian Arctic islands. Sometimes she appeared a few dozen miles from where she'd been seen months or years before. Other times she leapt hundreds of miles. Her identity invites speculation. Why didn't she sink? Investigators surmise that her steel hull remained sound enough. Though battered and rusted, she retained buoyancy in the cold, dense water. Her holds, emptied over time of fur cargo, may have become light. Ice could have supported her hull, keeping her from going low. She may have drifted partly embedded in ice, reducing wave stress. Boarders who entered her over the years describe rotting planks, broken furniture, frozen cabins. The interior was inhospitable. Dark, cold, dripping water, decks sagging, corridors strewn with debris. In some reports, loose floorboards swung with ice movement. In others, partially opened hatches with warped lids. But no signs of recent human occupation. Artifacts from Bachimo sometimes emerge in the hands of local communities. Furs, tools, copper knives, ulu blades, some labelled taken from Bachimo, reside in museums or private collections. How they came ashore from a drifting ship is uncertain. They may have floated free in debris or been removed during brief salvage visits. Over time, folklore grows around the ship. Hunters claim to see her spectral hull glinting in twilight ice fields. On overcast days, her silhouette is said to hover near the horizon, just beyond fog banks. Some Inuit tell of hearing creaks or groans on still nights, voices carried by the wind near moving ice. But these are anecdotal, unverified. In archival newspapers, the Bachimo shows up in headlines again and again. Ghost ship seen by Eskimos, freighter drifting alone, hunter board strange vessel. Yet each report is fragmentary, often second-hand, rarely credible enough to mount a serious salvage. The litigation costs, remoteness, extreme conditions always thwart sustained recovery. Government efforts have tried. In 2006, Alaska authorities initiated a search project to locate the Bachimo's final resting place among Arctic wrecks. But sonar sweeps and ice surveys turned up nothing definitive. She remains unlocated. Place's character, Bachimo is the Arctic embodied. Her rusting hull, her silent decks, her lonely drift. She's part of the frozen sea. The ice is both cradle and jail. She becomes legend and marker. A ghost in polar waters that shifts with wind, meant to be glimpsed and then lost. Through her, the sea speaks the language of absence. Her coil of stories, drift plots, boarding logs, Inuit witness statements, newspaper clippings, forms a web of memory. But no single thread resolves her fate. She haunts currents, drifting forever between ice floes, resisting salvage, resisting rest. SS Waratah, 1909. A late South Atlantic sunset glints over restless seas, and somewhere beyond that glow, a modern liner slips quietly out of view, never to be seen again. That ship is the SS Waratah, often called the Titanic of the South, lost in July 1909 with all 211 aboard, yet no confirmed trace has ever been found. Built in 1908 for the Blue Anchor Line, the Waratah was a grand passenger cargo steamer, around 465 feet long, steel hull, twin quadruple expansion engines, rated for about 13.5 knots. She was designed for dual purpose, carrying emigrants eastbound, freight westbound. Her hull included a cellular double bottom and 8 watertight compartments, features meant to make her practically immune from sinking. Yet those safety features, for reasons unknown, proved moot. On her second voyage, Waratah left Durban on the evening of July 26, 1909, bound for Cape Town. She carried crew and passengers and a substantial cargo. Heavy goods, lead, or concentrate agricultural products, some disembarked in Durban, others stayed aboard. Among those on shore was Claude Gustave Sawyer, a businessman who'd elected to leave the ship. Later he testified he had become uneasy about the ship's behaviour during the voyage. At about 4 a.m. on July 27th, the steamer Clan McIntyre spotted Waratah astern on her starboard side. They exchanged signals and navigational data. Waratah overtook Clan McIntyre, moving ahead into the distance. That exchange is regarded as the last confirmed contact. Soon afterward, visibility dropped and weather worsened rapidly. The sea state became dangerous. Some accounts say a cyclone developed by July 28th. After that, Waratah vanished. In the map room, plotting her path is fraught. From Durban to Cape Town lies a corridor along South Africa's wild east coast, with strong currents, particularly the Agulhas current pushing southward, meeting opposing winds. Storms can whip up quickly. Bathymetry shows rugged seabeds off the continental shelf, trenches plunging into deep ocean. If Waratah capsized or foundered beyond that shelf, wreckage might never drift back to shore. Search vessels immediately fanned out. On August 1st, a tug, the T.E. Fuller, sailed east of Durban but turned back in poor weather. The Royal Navy dispatched HMS Pandora, Fort, and Hermes. Also, Australia sent the steamer Sabine. Over 8 weeks, these ships covered 14,000 nautical miles in zigzag searches, even diving south into remote zones. No success. No lifeboats, no bodies, no floating wreckage. By December 15, 1909, Lloyd's of London officially declared Waratah missing. In December 1910, a Board of Trade inquiry in London examined testimonies, design documents, shipyard records, and expert statements. Experts argued Waratah had passed multiple inspections, by builders, by the company, and by Lloyd's itself. She had received the top classification BA, plus 100A1, indicating full compliance with seaworthiness standards. But critics questioned her stability, especially in heavy seas. Some evidence from her maiden voyage revealed she had a fire in a coal bunker that burned intermittently over several days. The ownership and builders had argued stability was adequate, but whispers remained. From the forensic autopsy side, several theories compete. One major idea is that Waratah encountered a freak wave, a rogue wave tens of meters high. That wave could roll her, swamp her holds, break hatches, flood multiple compartments instantly. If she capsized quickly, debris might be trapped underneath her hull, making detection extremely difficult. This theory gains traction because the Agulhas current region is known for generating extreme waves when wind and sea collide powerfully. Another hypothesis is cargo shift or liquefaction. Waratah's cargo included tonnage of lead ore concentrate, which under certain conditions can liquefy, turning into a free surface fluid that destabilizes ships. If her holds allowed that to happen, she might have lost stability suddenly. The combination of heavy cargo and open hatches under storm conditions could produce catastrophic capsize. A further idea, instability due to design or loading pattern. Some witnesses allege she had poor stability during service. If she was lightly loaded or unevenly trimmed, a storm could push her beyond safe limits. Even though she had watertight bulkheads, if enough compartments flooded or she rolled far enough, she might have been unable to recover. Some speculated explosion in a coal bunker, Coal dust ignition or spontaneous combustion might rupture bulkheads and weaken structure, yet such an explosion should leave wreckage or evidence. But none was found. Also, a bunker fire would not necessarily account for the total instantaneous loss. Then there is the matter of no distress signal. Waratah lacked wireless radio equipment. Thus no SOS transmission could be sent. That absence underscores how suddenly disaster may have struck. There was no time to raise alarm. In those days, many large ships still sailed without wireless, relying on signal lamps or flags. Another fragmentary account came from Edward Joe Conker, a Cape-mounted rifleman, who in 1929 claimed that on July 28, 1909, at Zora River, he and another observed through a telescope a steamship struggling in heavy seas, rolling heavily. A wave crashed over her and she vanished from view. Conker believed that was Waratah, but the observation was post facto and not fully documented during the inquiry. From the map room, plotting probable sinking positions yields multiple candidates. One zone is off the Eastern Cape near Mbache River mouth, where Clan McIntyre saw signals. Another is farther south, pushed by Agulhas drift into deep waters. Bathymetric maps show continental slopes plunging to thousands of meters. If she sank there, detection would be extraordinarily difficult, especially with early 20th century technology. Modern searches have tried. Emlyn Brown, a marine explorer, led multiple expeditions from 1983 through the 1990s to locate Waratah's wreck. In 1999, his team reported a sonar target about 6 miles off the eastern coast of South Africa, matching Waratah's outline. But a dive revealed the wreck was Nailsea Meadow, a German cargo ship sunk in World War II. Brown later acknowledged he had exhausted feasible search options and surrendered the chase. The lack of confirmed salvage, absence of bodies, and no floating debris deepened the weight of mystery. If Waratah had capsized quickly, few survivors might have escaped. Debris could sink with her, especially if she rolled wholly. In deep ocean zones, wreckage could descend into canyons, unreachable by early search technology. Further complicating matters, wind, wave drift, and current would carry any floating wreckage unpredictably. If pieces drifted south or east into remote sectors or under heavy ocean currents, they might never reach shipping lanes or inhabited coasts. The archive contains documents, shipyard blueprints, Board of Trade transcripts, witness statements, search logs, naval dispatches. They offer structural, design and procedural data, but no smoking gun. They show Waratah past inspections, but such inspections cannot guarantee in-storm perfection. Disagreements remain about her centre of gravity and how she handled heavy seas. In the map room overlay of currents, wind and probable drift, analysts simulate paths where she may have gone under. Some suggest she may have survived for a short drift period before sinking, carried by currents southward out of contact. Others assume sudden capsize with little drift at all. Waratah's hull becomes a ghost in the deep, present in design but absent in reality. The sea becomes both grave and veil. Her absence magnifies her myth. Her design, her cargo, her final known sightings, the currents and storms, together they frame mystery, not resolution. No wreck has ever been confirmed, no grave marked, no last recorded word. Waratah remains lost in the southern Indian Ocean, impossible to place, impossible to exonerate. The maps keep her secret, and the archives sigh with unanswered questions. SS Orang Medan, 1947. A strange crackle echoes across the airwaves in the tropic night of the Malacca Strait. Then a voice breaks through, trembling in Morse code. SOS from Orang Medan, we float. All officers including captain dead in chart room and on the bridge. Probably whole crew dead. A few chaotic dashes, then the final chilling words, I die, and nothing more. That call, or version of it, is the heartbeat of the Orang Medan legend. A ghost ship broadcasting a death sentence through the radio waves. But does the ship ever truly exist? The shadows around this story are deep. In many tellings, the date floats between 1947 and 1948. The location is given as the Straits of Malacca. Nearby ships, often named the Silver Star or City of Baltimore, are said to pick up the SOS, triangulate its origin, and steam into the fog. When they find her, they board the vessel drifting silently. No one stirs, no voices answer. The crew, including the captain, lie dead in the chart room or on the bridge, eyes open, mouths agape. Some say even the ship's dog lay dead, teeth bared. In some versions, there is a final fire in the cargo hold, a sudden explosion, and the ship sinks before the rescuers can hold her. But within these dramatic accounts lie fissures. First, no official registry lists a ship named Orang Medan. Neither Lloyd's Register nor Dutch Maritime Archives yield a consistent vessel matching that name. The ship does not appear in credible vessel manifests or war records. That absence suggests it may have been an unregistered, clandestine or fictional vessel. Second, no verified logs or survivor statements. The accounts depend largely on newspaper retellings, seafaring lore, and maritime magazines. The earliest versions appear in press reports, such as Dutch-Indonesian newspaper De Lokomotief in 1948, which published a series of 3 articles. These articles include a survivor narrative, a German crewman who allegedly washed ashore, claiming hazardous cargo of sulfuric acid and a deadly leak. But that survivor's identity remains uncorroborated. Third, no physical wreck evidence has ever been conclusively found. No deep-sea expedition has pointed to a sunken vessel matching the Orang Medan profile in the Malacca region. If she exploded and sank, as many versions claim, the debris field should be present, yet nothing matched the legend beyond vague sonar pings. Still, the story persists because it resonates. The radio room becomes a stage for terror. The unbroken radio wave, the final message echoing in ears, the dread of hearing "I die." The myth leans on that signal, impalpable, human and chilling, more than on any hull, document or corpse. Let's look closer at how the story unfolds in versions, and what archivists and skeptics have found when peeling back layers. One version, after receiving the distress signal, the Silver Star arrives at the drifting ship. The Silver Star crew boards and finds the dead men. They try to attach tow lines. Before they can start, smoke appears in the hold. Flames rise. They abandon the vessel, firefighting fails, and the Orang Medan explodes violently and sinks. In some versions, hull plates buckle, the deck lifts, the sea claims her within minutes. Another version includes that lone survivor, whose story is passed second hand. He claimed the cargo was highly corrosive acid or chemicals, that containers had leaked, fumes spread, killing the crew silently. He allegedly hid in a lifeboat. He washed ashore on Twangi Atoll in the Marshall Islands some days later, died of exposure, but gave the tale to a missionary who told it to the press. That narrative carries speculation of smuggling, secrecy, and forbidden cargo. To the myth versus archive mindset, archivists find inconsistencies. For one, the Silver Star's logbooks, where they exist, contain no record of boarding a ghost ship or responding to an SOS in that location. The name Orang Medan varies in spelling, origin stories, roots, sometimes Indonesia to Costa Rica, sometimes China to Sumatra, sometimes hidden in local waters. The message's text differs in each telling. The timing shifts, locations drift, the survivor's identity shifts. Further, skeptics point to how easy it was in mid-20th century journalism to amplify mysteries. One key figure, a journalist named Silvio Shirley from Trieste, is frequently cited as having shaped or even invented parts of the tale. In the Dutch papers De Lokomotief, the articles warn, "We don't have any other data on this mystery." They admit uncertainty, disclaim knowledge, yet the public narrative by then had grown dense and self-reinforcing. Some researchers surmise the story began earlier, in 1940 British newspaper articles, and Shirley later reworked elements. In other words, the Orang Medan may be a composite myth built gradually over years, drawing on multiple maritime rumours, distress calls, unverified boardings. One plausible technical hypothesis within the myth is chemical cargo leak. Acid or volatile substances reacting with water, creating toxic gases. The fumes incapacitate crew. In panic, someone triggers fire or explosion, but no record confirms a ship named Orang Medan carried such cargo. No registry confirms her route. The theory remains speculative. Another is carbon monoxide poisoning. A hidden fire or boiler failure leaks CO into living quarters. Crew collapse without visible wounds. The radio operator sends the last message, then succumbs. But again, no documented ship supports that hypothesis under that name. The map room or sea room overlay demonstrates how fragile such a ship's drift would be. The Straits of Malacca is a complex zone of shipping lanes, shallow shoals, strong currents, seasonal winds. A drifting hulk would likely be spotted, boarded, salvaged, or beached. Yet no credible salvage took place, no credible observations from local authorities. In many credible maritime mystery cases, there is at least some fragment, a hull fragment, a recovered log, a few bodies. In the Orang Medan case, those fragments are missing. Some writers see that as proof the ship never existed. Still, the story haunts because radio calls across empty seas remain vivid. The image of a ship calling through void, "I die," demands attention. It plays on our deepest fear: silence, abandonment, voices unanswered. For documentary voiceover, one must hold that tension. The legend itself becomes a character, a radio signal, an echo, a ghost in the ether. We may never bridge myth and archive. The Orang Medan, if she ever sailed, left no concrete tracks. The myth persists where the records yield only gaps. The sea keeps her secret. The signal fades. SS Valencia, 1906. A cold Pacific fog drapes over rugged cliffs. Waves pound hidden rocks. Somewhere in that swirl a ship struggles, or once struggled, against the sea. That ship is the SS Valencia, lost in January 1906 off Vancouver Island, whose tragedy spawned decades of ghost stories and claims of phantom lifeboats. Valencia was built in 1882, a 598-ton iron-hulled passenger steamer. Over time, she was repositioned to the US West Coast. On January 20th, 1906, she left San Francisco bound for Seattle via Victoria, carrying crew, passengers, general cargo. As she neared Vancouver Island on the night of January 22nd, storms and fog overtook her. Navigational certainty weakened. By late that night, Valencia struck a reef about 11 miles off Cape Beale on the island's west side. The hull was pierced, water gushed in. To avoid sinking outright, the captain attempted to ground her. She landed precariously in surf, separated by less than 100 yards from shore, but battered by breakers. Inside the ship, chaos took over. Lifeboats were launched, many in defiance of the captain's orders. Several capsized while being lowered. Others were improperly manned. Some made it to sea. One life raft drifted free and later washed ashore. Survivors clung to rigging, to the deck, to whatever remained above water as the sea claimed her. Over roughly 36 hours, tremendous waves battered the wreck and tore her apart piece by piece. As darkness and surf intensified, survivors perished or were swept away. Only 37 men survived. All the women and children died. From the place's character perspective, Valencia becomes part of that shoreline, that reef, that stretch of coast known as the graveyard of the Pacific. The cliffs, the breakers, the fog, these elements are her environment, her judge. The reef was merciless, the surf relentless. The shore carved her ruin over days, the wreck lay half submerged, visible yet untouchable for some time. Over the years, the Valencia's wreck site became a magnet for rumour, myth, whispers carried by storm winds. In 1933, 27 years after the disaster, one of her missing lifeboats, lifeboat number 5, was found drifting in Berkeley Sound. Remarkably, it was in relatively good condition, with much original paint still visible, yet no bodies or personal items accompanied it. The lifeboat's nameplate was preserved and went to the Maritime Museum of British Columbia. This discovery fueled local legends. Fishermen claimed over the decades they saw that lifeboat rowed by skeletons in sea caves near Pachena Bay. Some said they peered into a cave mouth and saw skeletal figures tied to oars. A lightkeeper, Philip Dakin, once speculated that survivors may have entered a sea cave and died there, unable to escape. But others among local rescuers and historians dismissed these stories as folklore. Ghost ship tales also circulated. Sailors reported seeing a phantom steamer off Pachena Point, outlined faintly in mist, with waves washing over her decks and spectral shapes clinging to rails. One account claims that during the rescue passage of the city of Topeka, some passengers saw within the black smoke emitted from Topeka's funnel the outline of Valencia, complete with rigging and figures. The ship signalled the Topeka before fading away. From the archive side, investigators and scholars dig through records, trying to separate fact from fancy. Reports from the US Marine Inspection Service and national inquiries lay out causes: navigational error, poor visibility, unfamiliar coastline, lack of local safety infrastructure along the island's west coast, and inadequate lifeboat training. The official reports emphasize a combination of misfortune, human error, and harsh seas, not supernatural forces. Examining the lifeboat recovery, lifeboat number 5 had been missing from the initial wreck site. Its later appearance in Berkeley Sound could be explained by drift, currents, wind, but the absence of personal items or skeletons suggests that if occupants ever embarked in it, they were likely lost at sea long before. The myth of skeletons in caves is unsubstantiated by any recovered remains or credible documentation. The loss of women and children also fueled moral outrage and myth-making. In newspapers and community memory, the image of mothers and infants perishing was powerful. In turn, storytellers wove ghost tales, a phantom Valencia returning to shore for her lost passengers. But archival evidence does not support recurring appearances of a shipwrecked Valencia, beyond reports in local newspapers, some decades old. The physical site itself changed. Currents, storms, and time dispersed wreckage. Few fragments remained. The sea reclaimed her. Over time, pieces drifted, sank, or eroded. The reef and surf reshaped her remains. To would-be investigators, her final resting place is scattered. On charts of currents and drift around Berkeley Sound and the West Vancouver Island coast, analysts model how a lifeboat might drift from the wreck toward inland waters. Wind, tides, seasonal storms, eddies, all would influence drift paths. The long delay, 27 years, means that the lifeboat's discovery near coastline may reflect complex drift routes rather than static presence. Meanwhile, local memory and indigenous stories contributed further layers. Native communities along that coast spoke of hearing voices when storms raged. Some recounted gull cries resonating like human cries. Some elders claimed that at night a ship's bell song echoes in certain coves. These cultural echoes enrich the ghost narrative, but do not lend archival weight. Newspaper archives show early reports of phantom Valencia sightings, beginning within months of the wreck. In 1906, reports circulated of a steamer-shaped light seen off Patchina Point. Over the next decades, newspapers sometimes published accounts of fishermen encountering a drifting ship silhouette matching the Valencia's profile, but detail is often vague. No names, no logs, sketchy coordinates. Historians caution these as unverified anecdotes. Many of the ghost narratives depend on blending fact and metaphor. The recovered lifeboat is real. The disaster and high death toll are factual. The reef and wreck site are documented. The legends weave around these anchors, creating a haunting tapestry. But when archives contradict the legends, for example, no skeletons were recovered in caves, the lifeboat carried no traces of human remains, historians regard those parts as embellishment. To storytell, Valencia's wreck is a character in a liminal space, sometimes present, sometimes absent, sometimes seen, sometimes obscured by fog, sometimes material, sometimes legendary. She anchors both harsh maritime history and the human impulse to imagine the unseen. The shadow of Valencia persists in the sound of breakers, in fishermen's tales, in museum relics, in faint lifeboat outlines. Her ghost stories survive because they echo grief, loss, awe, and because the sea seldom gives up her secrets willingly. HMS Eurydice, 1878. Salt spray whips across the looming cliffs of the Isle of Wight. Fog drifts in tendrils across dark waters. Somewhere in those mists, a three-masted hull glides silently into view. Or so say those who swear they have seen the ghost of HMS Eurydice. This ship's memory is etched not just in records, but in the sea itself. HMS Eurydice began her life as a Royal Navy corvette, launched in 1843. In her early decades, she served across the globe. In 1861, she was repurposed as a training ship for naval cadets. By 1877, she was refitted for active service and ordered to return from Bermuda to Portsmouth. In March 1878, she set sail for England. After a swift transit across the Atlantic, Eurydice neared home waters on March 24, 1878. Off the nose, the weather turned suddenly fierce. A heavy snow squall struck near the Isle of Wight. The ship's officers were caught by surprise. The wind billowed, the sea rose, coral sky turned grey. The cadets and crew fought to hold sail control, but disaster struck. According to the official inquiry, the ship capsized rapidly. Eyewitnesses reported seeing the vessel roll over. Parts of her rigging broke, the hull tipped. She sank in Sandown Bay. Of the roughly 319 souls aboard, including officers, crew and trainees, only 2 survived. exposed in frigid water until rescued. Many died on the decks before she went under, others perished in the icy waves. The inquiry cleared the ship's company of blame, attributing loss primarily to the sudden and violent squall. In the years after her loss, Eurydice's wreck was raised, but she was too damaged to be saved. She was broken up. Her bell was preserved and now hangs in a church tower in Shanklin. Memorials stand in Portsmouth, Sandown and Gosport commemorating the hundreds lost. But the sea does not let memory die. In local lore, the Eurydice lives as phantom and echo. Sailors and residents of the Isle of Wight report mysterious sightings of a warship under sail, silhouetted in dawn mist, passing the coast or looming near Sandown Bay. The ship appears solid, rigged, spectral, and perhaps just for a moment before it vanishes back into fog and memory. One of the most famous accounts comes from the 1930s. A Royal Navy submarine under Commander F. Lipscomb was reportedly navigating near the Isle of Wight when the crew saw a full-rigged ship crossing their path. The submarine altered course to avoid collision, yet when they returned to the spot moments later, the ship was gone. No trace, no wake, no sign it had been there. Decades later, on October 17, 1998, Prince Edward was filming along that stretch of coastline for the television series Crown and Country. He claimed to see a 3-masted vessel off the island, and members of his film crew reportedly captured an image of a ship that seemed out of place. At that time, no sailing training ships were out on the water nearby. The ship appeared then dissolved into mist. From the myth versus archive lens, these claims carry intrigue but also serious questions. The local records do not confirm naval movements or sailing vessels matching Eurydice's pattern in those hours. No naval log or harbour authority noted a ship ghosting past. Some believe the sightings may be explained by reflections. A moon or distant light refracted in fog layers can create illusions of hulls and masts. In misty sea conditions, optical mirages are well known, bending light across horizons. Also, names and details shift. Some eyewitness reports describe a battleship, others a corvette, others a sailing vessel. The timing, direction and rigging details vary from account to account. Many reports come decades after events, filtered by memory, rumour and atmospheric drama. Yet the Isle of Wight coastline is the canvas on which Eurydice's spirit is painted. Dunnose, Sandown Bay, Shanklin Cliffs. These places bear the scars of her sinking and the weight of her memory. The shoreline becomes partner in her legend. Where ship and sea meet, the fog and surf become veil and stage. In some stories, the phantom Eurydice passes so close to cliffs that keepers hear her rigging creak, see her sails flutter. In some nights on stormlit horizons, men say they glimpse her silhouette moving against wave shadows. A few old fishermen claim a repeated pattern. The apparition appears only on certain wind directions, certain tides, usually near anniversaries of her loss. Whether coincidence or something deeper, these patterns contribute to the myth's texture. Archive records provide grounding. The inquiry transcripts, Navy logs, refit documents and witnesses lay bare the tragic loss, the engineering constraints, the meteorological data. They show the ship was not ideally stable, that the weather struck suddenly, that control was lost swiftly. They show the hull design, sail plan, crew reports. The archive holds firmly what is known materially. When myth hunters compare sightings to those archives, the gaps gape. None of the reported sightings correlate exactly to known dates, known vessel movements, or documented ships. The phantom vessel never appears in a known time that a real ship could have been there. There is no record of a 3-masted warship passing at odd hours matching the reports. Place as character. In this chapter, the Eurydice becomes a lingering presence in the channel. Her wreck, her memory, her ghost are tied to the Isle of Wight itself. The sea, cliffs and mist act as her stage, her relic, her audience. Every fog, every swell becomes a possible return. We might imagine a night in fog. A fisherman sees masts emerge from the haze. He reads her shape. 3 masts, tall yards, thinks of Eurydice, feels a chill. He calls his mate, waves flash, the ship fades. Was it wind hitting a wreck, an atmospheric anomaly? Or was it the memory of a ship that still sails in shadow? In maritime lore, Eurydice's ghost joins a long pantheon. The Flying Dutchman, the Mary Celeste. Phantom ships sighted off coasts. But her uniqueness lies in how firmly she anchors to a place, Isle of Wight, and how local memory has kept her alive. The cliff paths, the lighthouses, the fishing boats, they all know that coastline. In them, Eurydice returns. She's not a ship in sail still, but a possibility. Each reported apparition is brief, fleeting. She does not anchor, she drifts at the boundary between sea and sky. The mist, the glare, the lapping waves are part of her form. She might be memory made manifest in the coastal fog. The archives and the myths do not reconcile. The inquiries, the logs, the weather reports tell one story. The eyewitnesses tell another. The sea lies between. Eurydice remains partly in records, partly in the minds of those who saw her silhouette. In that space, she endures. Princess Augusta, 1738, and the Palatine Light. Between snowy seas and rocky shores lies a flicker on the horizon, a light that appears, then vanishes. Islanders call it the Palatine Light. It haunts the waters off Block Island, Rhode Island, and it is tied to a real wreck from 1738. The ship once known as the Princess Augusta, later conflated in legend as the Palatine. The Princess Augusta sailed from Rotterdam in August 1738, bound for Philadelphia. On board were scores of German emigrants from the Palatinate region, families hoping for new lives in colonial America. The ship also carried provisions, goods, and the dreams of hundreds. But misfortune began early. The water supply became contaminated. Illness swept through the passengers. Some sources say that more than 200 died en route, and half the crew perished, including the original captain. First Mate Andrew Brooke assumed command. Storms and illness pushed the vessel off course. Instead of trending south to reach the Delaware River, she drifted northwest. Weeks passed. Survivors begged for water and help, while seas continued to batter the hull. In December, a fierce blizzard caught the ship near Block Island. She ground first on a shoal known locally as the Hummock, drifted off briefly, then struck again near Sandy Point. Her hull was breached, rigging shredded, decks battered. The stricken vessel came to rest near the island's northern tip in freezing weather. In the immediate aftermath, depositions were taken from the surviving crew. Their testimony is among the few archival pillars under the legend. They told how, after the grounding, Brooke and the remaining crew rowed ashore, abandoning many passengers aboard. Island residents intervened, pleading that the survivors on board be permitted off. Local folks helped bring passengers ashore, tended to the sick, buried the dead. About 20 died after landing. Some were interred in what came to be marked as the Palatine Graves. The stranded Augusta was deemed unsalvageable. Some depositions suggest locals and ship's officers burned her remains, or set her aflame before pushing her back to sea to sink. The wreck faded from memory. No confirmed remains of her hull have ever been located. But begin the night. Snow, cold, gusting wind, ocean spray. Out of that stage emerged the ghost stories. Generations of islanders and mariners tell of a ship aflame off Block Island's northern coast, often between Christmas and New Year's Day. A glowing silhouette, a torch-like blaze on waves, wandering in mist. They say it drifts along the shore, then dissolves. Sometimes the light seems stationary, like a distant lamp. Other times it burns bright, shaping itself like a ship. This is the Palatine Light. One early report dates from 1811. Dr. Aaron C. Willey, a Block Island resident, described seeing from the northern end of the island a blaze 6 or 7 miles offshore. Sometimes it appears like a distant window light, sometimes like a burning ship. He claimed the phenomenon was familiar to long-time islanders, but rarely spoken to outsiders. Over decades, sightings waxed and waned. In some years none, in others multiple. Poets and folklorists embraced the tale. In 1867, John Greenleaf Whittier published a poem called The Palatine, influenced by island lore, transforming wreck and memory into legend. That poem popularized the name Palatine for a ship that was usually known as Princess Augusta. Whittier's version adds drama, a wretched female passenger refusing to leave, the ship enveloped in flames, screams heard across waves. But his work is poetry, not court record. Meanwhile, local history work sought to push back. Samuel Livermore's History of Block Island, 1877, criticised the poetic lens that painted islanders as villains or sacrificial wreckers. He argued the actual deposition support that the islanders aided survivors, that early retellings exaggerated. Over time, the legend split into 2 main versions. In one, the islanders are compassionate. They rescued survivors, buried the dead, retrieved goods, and helped mourn. In the other, darker version, locals are wreckers who allegedly lit false beacons to lure the ship ashore, murdered or abandoned survivors, looted cargo, then burned the vessel and watched it drift away as an omen. Gradient between myth and archive. The depositions do show serious misconduct by First Mate Brooke, accusations of extortion, forcing passengers to pay for dwindling provisions, refusing to let them remove goods from the grounded ship. The depositions also note heavy mortality, contaminated water, crew deaths. These real elements gave the legend fuel. But the lore about islanders lighting false lights has no firm archival support. There is no documented inquiry convicting locals of wrecking or murder. Many sightings of the Palatine Light appear in local newspapers in the 19th century. Ghost ship seen off Northern Ireland. Burning vessel drifting in winter nights. Phantom glow on the waves. These accounts are often second-hand, sometimes decades removed from the wreck itself. Some reports say the light seems to follow passing vessels, as though drawn to warning or haunting them. When researchers look at coastal maps and drift charts around Block Island, they notice how currents, wind, and cold winter air can generate optical reflections, phosphorescent gases, or light refraction. Under certain conditions, marsh gas, decomposing organic matter, or shallow seabeds may reflect moonlight or distant lighthouses through mirage effects. These natural phenomena can create illusions of a flickering flame over water. In fact, some historians suggest that what people saw was not a phantom ship, but refracted lights from lighthouses, distant vessels, or local light sources twisting in fog. Over centuries, memory, repetition, and cultural desire may have enhanced small flashes into full ship forms. Still, islanders have their own stories. Some claim during cold winters, sailors arrive frightened, reporting a ship glowing off the horizon. Fishermen sometimes pause in mid-waters, hearing distant low moans or seeing rigging against fog. They say the closer they try to approach, the farther the ship seems. Others say that after a Palatine Light sighting, storms or bad weather followed, giving it omen status. In the place's character motif, Block Island's North Shore, Sandy Point and Mohegan Bluffs serve as the landscape where legend and memory meet the sea. The shoreline becomes the frame for the light's appearance. The reefs, sands, currents, they hold the ghost's stage and echo. The sea, cold and shifting lanes, becomes both cradle and curtain. The Palatine Graves marker, placed in 1947, reads simply Palatine Graves 1738. It marks the spot where many believe the dead were buried. No skeletal remains have ever been confirmed beneath the soil. The marker, along with local walkways, cliffs and shoreline, ties memory to place. Folklorists note how the legend evolved. As spiritualism rose in the 19th century, storytellers grew more receptive to ghostly sightings. Early tourist recorded versions. Local historical societies retold the story, and Whittier's poem cemented it in New England literary culture. The Palatine Light now sits midway between disaster and spectral omen. When watching the sea off Block Island on a winter night, one may imagine a glow drifting in from the waves, a candle on water, or a phantom ship refusing rest. Yet the archive compels restraint. No wreck confirmed, no fire logs, no verified remains. The depositions allow us to sketch tragedy. The rumours carry the rest. In the interplay of place and memory, the Princess Augusta lives twice, as a ship that struck and died, and as a ghost that returns in light. The Palatine Light is both beacon and question, a flame in the dark illuminating gaps between history and belief. Franklin Expedition, Erebus and Terror, 1845. A sharp Arctic wind slices across the ice. The horizon is a blur of white and grey, the sea frozen in slabs. Beneath that ice lie two ships, lost for over a century, their stories long folded into cold legend. These are HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, vessels of Sir John Franklin's doomed 1845 expedition in search of the Northwest Passage. Franklin's mission left England on May 19, 1845. Two ships, Erebus and Terror, loaded with provisions, scientific instruments, steam engines, and dozens of men, set sail into the unknown Arctic. The goal, traverse the Northwest Passage from east to west, a feat yet uncompleted. The ships carried ample coal, food stores and supplies, intended for years trapped in ice if needed. For 2 seasons they charted carefully, following known passages, keeping logs. In 1846, both ships became locked in ice off the prow of King William Island. The ice encased them, immobilised their hulls, battered their frames. Over winter they held, expecting release come summer. But the ice held them fast. By spring and summer, pressure, cold, lack of fresh food, scurvy, disease and failing provisions weighed heavily. Franklin died in June 1847. The logs and journals break off in 1847 and early 1848, leaving scant clarity about final days. Investigators later recovered a disordered note left in a cairn near Lambert Island. The ships were abandoned in April 1848. Crews heading south toward Back River, no survivors known. From the map room's perspective, plotting the drift and possible paths is complex. The pack ice, shifting moats, leads, open channels, pressure ridges, all move with wind and current. If the ships had broken free, they might drift into channels, but the record suggests they stayed stuck until finally abandoned. The geography around King William Island is a labyrinth of ice, shallows and deadly currents. Any drift would be slow and unpredictable, making escape nearly impossible once trapped. Years of search expeditions followed, dozens between the mid-19th century and late 20th century, scouring Arctic maps, Inuit testimony, land cairns, stray artifacts. Inuit oral histories passed down stories of ships and bones on islands. Those stories were crucial. In many Inuit accounts, the survivors were seen walking, dragging sleds, falling near rivers. These oral traditions guided later searchers. In 2014, Parks Canada teams, working with Inuit partners, made a breakthrough. They discovered the wreck of HMS Erebus, lying in Wilmot and Crampton Bay, south of King William Island. The hull was intact, decks collapsed, artifacts preserved in Arctic cold. In 2016, the wreck of HMS Terror was located in Terror Bay, off the southwest of King William Island. The discoveries transformed a mythic mystery into a new kind of historical puzzle. From the forensic autopsy view, the artifacts tell stories. Over dozens of dives, archaeologists have retrieved items: personal objects, navigational instruments, clothing fragments, sealed medicine bottles, musket percussion caps, a leather book cover, even a fishing rod in an officer's cabin. Some items are stunningly preserved thanks to cold, low oxygen and the Arctic environment. But what killed the men? Human remains were found on King William Island and nearby mainland. Some graves dating from the expedition's winter quarters on Beechy Island from earlier seasons held well-preserved bodies. Examinations reveal lead levels in bones higher than expected. One hypothesis is that lead poisoning from solder in canned provisions or water cisterns contributed to physical and mental decline. Scurvy, starvation, hypothermia also are invoked. Some skeletal remains show signs of cannibalism. Cut marks consistent with defleshing appear on bones recovered near graves, supporting accounts that, in desperation, survivors resorted to extreme measures. The balance of evidence is stark. These men suffered in brutal conditions, malnourished, diseased, freezing. Into that human tragedy, the ships themselves become time capsules. Erebus's cabins still hold items in place. In one officer's cabin, a parallel ruler, an intact thermometer and a brass fishing rod were found. The galley stores, the casks, the tools, all frozen in place. These are silent witnesses. From the drift and decay analysis, the ship's positions in relatively shallow water matter. Erebus lies about 11 metres down, making it susceptible to storm damage, shifting ice stress and deck collapse. Terror sits deeper, more protected. Weather, seasonal ice pressure and waves acting from above may crack decks, force collapse open hull plates. Some sections of the upper deck of Erebus have already sheared off over time. Archive records offer outlines: logs, provision lists, officers' journals, correspondence, Inuit testimonies and search reports. They show the expedition's timeline, supply missions, previous Arctic experience and later search endeavours. But they cannot fully explain the collapse. The gap between what was known and what remains is immense. The maproom overlay shows plausible routes survivors might have taken after abandoning ship. From the canoeing and sled maps, exit paths along waterways southward were attempted. But terrain is harsh. Swamps, muskeg, rivers, tundra, freezing cold. Many bodies were found along the southern routes, but none reached safe settlement. The land and ice acted as silent killers. Forensic assessments suggest that once the ships were abandoned, the crew had limited mobility, weakened health, exposure. The degradation over years meant that bodies decayed, bones scattered, artifacts lost. The wrecks hold few human remains now, Most lies in land graves or lost to time. Climate change now adds urgency. The wrecks face faster deterioration. Ice melt, storms, wave energy, shifting sediments threaten structural integrity and artifact preservation. Parks Canada warns that upper decks are unstable. Sections detach and shift under pressure. Every season counts. The Arctic Sea and ice are characters too. Cold, patient, relentless. They corrode wood and metal slowly. The ice cycles crush, shift, scrape. Sediment settles. Organics decay. Light is limited. Each dive must be planned meticulously. Archaeologists work side by side with Inuit communicators, preserving cultural heritage and story. In this chapter, Erebus and Terra are still partially alive under the sea. Their hulls, corridors, cabins are memory in steel and wood. Their artifacts are voices from the past. The bodies found ashore are silent testimony to desperation, poverty of life, collapse of will and flesh. The sea is grave but also archive. Each artifact retrieved, each cut mark on bone, each drift model, each Inuit memory brings us closer yet leaves others in shadow. The cold Arctic refuses closure. The ships lie in ice water, half buried, half exposed between past and present, between story and science, and their mystery remains. HMS Resolute, 1850s. A pale Arctic twilight. Ice floes press one against another. Silence reigns, interrupted only by the groan of shifting sheets of ice. Somewhere in that frozen expanse drifts a ghost ship, HMS Resolute, abandoned, carried by currents, later reborn in wood and memory. Resolute began life as the Ptarmigan, launched on the River Tyne, then purchased by the Royal Navy in 1850, refitted for Arctic service, renamed Resolute, reinforced for icy seas. She was assigned to one of the Royal Navy's search squadrons in the early 1850s, itself seeking the lost Franklin expedition. In those years she sailed among ice, exploring channels, waiting in drift, probing for signs of the disappeared ships. By April 1854, Resolute and several companion ships of the Belcher expedition became locked in sea ice. The ice field tightened. Captain Henry Kellett, under orders from Sir Edward Belcher, reluctantly abandoned Resolute and her sister ships. The crews left in good order, hatches secured, stores stowed, charts placed, locks set. They marched across ice toward rendezvous points and supply ships. They presumed the vessels would perish there, yet Resolute refused to die. Drifting free when ice began to thaw, she wandered, unmanned, across Arctic waters. In September 1855, nearly a year and a half later, an American whaler, George Henry, captained by James Buddington, spotted her adrift in pack ice near Baffin Island. The ship was listless but afloat. The whalers boarded, found her relatively intact though battered, and set about pumping out water, repairing rigging, adjusting sails. She was claimed under salvage rights, eventually towed to New London, Connecticut. Once restored, the US Congress purchased her for $40,000 and returned her to Britain as a gesture of diplomacy. She resumed service in the Royal Navy until decommissioned in 1879. In 1880, the timbers of her dismantled hull were transformed. Oak boards, beams, planks, crafted into desks and tables. One of these, the Resolute desk, was gifted to US President Rutherford B. Hayes and ultimately became a fixture in the Oval Office. In our narrative, Resolute is not just a ship but an Arctic wanderer, a vessel that defied abandonment, drifted between nations, and became a desk that speaks through centuries. Let's drift into the map room. The ice paths of the Canadian Arctic tell of currents and seasonal thaw. The structural deep freeze and subsequent melt cycles allow a ship locked in ice to emerge, carried by water and flows. Resolute likely drifted over 1,000 miles from where she was abandoned. An astonishing voyage. The ice channels, leads, tide currents, wind pushes, all are her highways. On charts these currents converge, diverge. From Melville Sound to Davis Strait, from Baffin waters toward Greenland, she traversed corridors few ships see unassisted. The deck logs which ended when she was abandoned give no guidance. Her drift was uncontrolled. Her hull design, reinforced for polar hardship, likely helped her survive the ice's abuse longer than expected. Places character. Resolute's hull becomes a silent wanderer of ice sea. The ocean, the pack, the shimmering Arctic sky, all become parts of her journey. The fragile timbers, the framing, the structure, though battered, hold stories of storms, crushing pressure, cold fatigue, salt and endurance. Boarding by whalers yields forensic texture. The interior spaces still held some stores, charts, instruments. Some items remained stowed as if left by hands that expected to return. Captain's quarters showed glasses, decanters, royal flags. The rigging and spars had damage, topmasts missing, sails tattered, hull plating stressed. The pump rooms, the hold, the cabins, all told of slow water ingress and age wear. The fact that she drifted without sinking shows how robust she was built. Her human abandonment becomes part of the drama. The crew left with certainty they would never return, yet someone, ice, waves, temperature, allowed the vessel to live on. Resolute becomes paradox, dead ship carrying life. She became a drifting archive of the past. From the archive perspective, Admiralty charts, expedition logs, search records, journal entries by crew and officers, salvage reports, all offer edges of her story. We know when she was abandoned, by whom, where. We know American whalers recovered her. We know how she returned home. We know her decommissioning and timber reuse. But large gaps remain: the exact path she drifted, the damage sustained en route, the hours she spent alone in ice fields. Some puzzles resist clarity. Which currents carried her? Did she clear the ice early or late? Did she suffer storms or grounding? Did parts of her break off? Did she rotate under currents? Drifts modelled by modern oceanographers suggest she could have travelled from Melville to Davis Strait under summer melt corridors and winter drift, but uncertainties abound. The timbers themselves carry metaphor and material, beams that resisted ice pressure, planks that creaked under thermal cycles, nails and fasteners weakened by time. These all spoke when craft workers cut, planed, shaped them. The wood that once held sails, masts, gales, now holds pen, ink, pledges, signatures. In that transition, ship becomes desk, sea becomes study. Public symbolism is strong. The Resolute desk is more than a piece of furniture. It's a token of friendship between nations, a relic from polar struggle, a memory of survival from abandonment. Presidents sit before it, unaware perhaps of the ice drift, the sea cold, the drift corridors, the teeth of time. In this chapter, Resolute drifts silently between ocean's memory and human memory. The ice is her midwife and her tomb. The maps and current charts are her route diary, incomplete but suggestive. The desk in Washington is her lasting voice. She exists in the Arctic seas and inside halls of power. Each plank, each nail, each drift line, each archive report links sea, ship and history. Resolute's journey is not a sudden wreck, not a silent abandonment in shallow water. She is a wanderer. She resists disappearance until repatriated. She holds the stories of ice, diplomacy, navigation, endurance. Her presence haunts Arctic maps. Her timbers remain in a desk where decisions are made. The voyage from ice to House of Heads is strange but real. In those corridors, in those halls, the drift continues. The sea speaks, Resolute listens. SS Edmund Fitzgerald, 1975. A low November sun sets beyond pine ridges as heavy lake clouds gather over Superior. On that dark evening in 1975, a lone bulk freighter battles a monster of wind and wave, sending radio pulses into the void in its final hours. That ship is SS Edmund Fitzgerald, a modern tragedy where the radio room and hull both whisper unanswered warnings. The Fitzgerald, longest and largest freighter on the Great Lakes when launched in 1958, left Superior, Wisconsin on November 9, 1975, loaded with 26,116 tons of taconite ore pellets. She ran in company with another freighter, the Arthur M. Anderson. Weather forecasts predicted a storm passing south of Lake Superior, but conditions often change fast on this inland sea. As the fleet pushed east, a deep low-pressure system tightened over the lake. By evening of November 10th, winds exceeded gale strength. Waves built. The Anderson, in radio contact, tracked many of the same conditions that would doom the Fitzgerald. Around 7:10 p.m., in worsening storm, the last known transmission came. "We are holding our own." The words were calm, even measured, masking a dire reality. The radio room then went silent. No hasty SOS calls, no frantic signals. The Fitzgerald disappeared. From the radio room structure, she had declared trouble earlier that evening to Avafors, a Swedish ship. "I have a bad list, lost both radars, taking heavy seas over the deck, one of the worst seas I've ever been in." Despite that, no direct distress call was ever made. The radio operators remained in contact with Anderson, but the disaster overtook them without warning. Time and space converge in the forensic map room. The Fitzgerald sank about 17 miles north-northwest of Whitefish Point in Canadian waters at depth of roughly 530 feet. Her wreck lies in two main pieces, separated by about 170 feet. The breakup suggests that the ship stressed, collapsed and parted during descent or upon impact. Investigators explored many hypotheses. One leading theory, flooding of cargo holds via failed hatch closures. Heavy seas wash across deck, water overtops hatches. If clamps are loose or gaskets fail, water seeps in, reducing buoyancy and dramatically lowering freeboard. In Fitzgerald's case, she rode low in the water, making her more vulnerable to waves washing aboard. Another theory, structural failure. The Fitzgerald's winter load line changes had reduced her freeboard, and her hull may have been stressed by repeated voyages. Under the tremendous pounding of waves, the hull could have fractured. In particular, longitudinal stresses might have caused the midsection to bend or fail. Combined with flooding, the failure could cascade quickly. The rogue wave or Three Sisters hypothesis is compelling. Mariners report that on Lake Superior, when three large waves form in succession, each one overtops the previous, compounding damage. Anderson crew say they felt two monstrous waves strike their own ship and saw them heading toward the Fitzgerald. Such waves could slam the deck, sweep hatches, rip vents or railings, and flood holds in moments. A shoaling or grounding theory also persisted. Some charts at the time mischarted 6-fathom shoal northeast of Caribou Island. Anderson's captain later said the Fitzgerald passed dangerously close. If her hull grazed or struck that shoal, it could have damaged plating, breached holds, and begun stealth flooding even before wave damage set in. But divers found no clear evidence of contact or scratch marks at the wreck site. Topside damage is also considered. Breakage of vents or railings reported earlier in the voyage may have allowed additional flooding into ballast or walkways. If fencing, vents or deck structures broke, the water could penetrate parts of the hull not normally exposed. That would speed destabilization. Through the map room's modelling of wind, wave height, fetch and direction, simulation shows that at 7 p.m. the Fitzgerald was under extraordinary sea states. Average waves exceeding 19 feet, gusts reaching hurricane force, and rare waves above 30 or even 36 feet. In that environment, even a ship designed for heavy cargo can be overwhelmed. In the wreck's forensic autopsy, the two separated hull sections speak. The bow and stern lie broken apart. The midsection is missing or crushed. Bulk cargo blankets taconite pellets across the wreck. The hatch, coamings and clamps are largely intact, but many clamps were likely not fully engaged. Some gaskets show deformation. The hatch covers may have collapsed under pressure. The division bulkheads were non-watertight screens, not fully sealed. Once water entered one hold, it could spread. Many crew bodies were never recovered. The cold, deep, freshwater cracked bacterial activity. In Lake Superior, average temperatures hover just above freezing. The lake never gives up her dead, bodies sink, remain preserved, or trapped in sediment. But in 1994, a diver did find a body near the pilot house door, fully clothed and wearing a life jacket. This rare discovery is frozen in time, but no complete human remains survive in situ in the wreck site. Because there were no survivors or direct witnesses, pinpointing the exact cascade of failure is difficult. Some believe a combination, wave overtopping, hatch seal failure, structural stress, possible grounding, worked in concert. None of the theories by itself fully satisfies, each leaves a gap. In the radio room, the last message remains haunting, calm, composed, human. We are holding our own. But that phrase hides more than it reveals. It may mark a moment just before overwhelming. The radio silence that follows becomes part of the mystery. The Fitzgerald's ghost now haunts Whitefish Point. The underwater site is a shrine. Her bell was salvaged and now sits in the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum. Divers visit her remains with reverence. She is not a legend of spirits or hauntings, as much as a caution of nature's power and human limits. Maps of currents, storms, wave models continue to be cross-checked. Fresh computer simulations, meteorological reconstructions, structural models, they all push hypotheses, but none can say with certainty which factor was fatal first. The ship's final moments remain locked under cold water and shifting metal. In this chapter, the radio room and the forensic hull combine. The radio pulse ends, the hull breaks. The data and models speak. The sea remains mute. The Fitzgerald is both modern and mythical. A vessel that confronted wind, freight, water, and lost without trace in seconds. The waves closed over her. SS Bannockburn, 1902. A grey, biting dawn over Lake Superior. Ice mist drifts low across the water's mirror. Some sailors say they've seen a steel hull carving through waves that vanish before they reach it. That ship, they whisper, is the SS Bannockburn, the Great Lakes' own Flying Dutchman. On November 20th, 1902, the Bannockburn departed Fort William, today part of Thunder Bay, Ontario, downbound toward Georgian Bay laden with 85,000 bushels of wheat. She was young, steel-hulled, robust, but her last voyage would become a legend. Early that day she reportedly ran aground, though apparently sustained only minor damage. She was inspected, declared seaworthy, and set out again the next morning. Later on November 21st, Captain James McMore of the upbound freighter Algonquin spotted her through binoculars, some 7 miles to his southeast, about 80 miles off Keweenaw Point and 40 miles off Isle Royale. He recognised her profile, watched her progress. Then suddenly in fog or murk she vanished from sight. He searched briefly, but she was gone. He later attributed the disappearance to obscuring snow or fog. Night fell. A fierce storm struck Lake Superior, winds gusting, snow swirling, visibility collapsing. Around 11 p.m, the passenger steamer Huronix Night Watch reported passing lights in the storm. A ship's running lights in the distance. They believed these belonged to the Bannockburn. They passed without incident and no distress signals were exchanged. The storm raged on. By the next morning, Bannockburn was overdue. Her absence became alarming. Over the next days, search operations scoured the lake, but found no wreck, no survivors. The only confirmed pieces of evidence were a cork life preserver washed ashore near Grand Marais and a single oar. No bodies, no hull fragments, no logs. From the map-room's lens, her vanishing is startling. Lake Superior is enormous, with storm-driven waves, underwater shoals, shifting current eddies. If the Bannockburn sank in deep water, debris might have stayed down, never surfacing. If she struck Caribou Island Reef, a reef dangerously near in her path, she could have grounded without signalling. An old theory holds that the lighthouse on Caribou Island had been turned off for the off-season, making reef warnings invisible. Some investigators propose she struck that reef, lost her hull integrity, and sank rapidly under storm pressure with little chance for distress. Others suggest a catastrophic structural failure, possibly exacerbated by her earlier grounding damage, combined with heavy seas. But no definitive evidence confirms which path was fatal. Into myth she sailed. Within a year of her disappearance, she gained the name the Flying Dutchman of the Great Lakes. Mariners began reporting faint lights in snowy storms off Lake Superior's north shore. On dark nights, some claimed to see her hull or lights flicker in the fog or outline itself against waves. Some said they glimpsed skeletons on deck. These sightings, always brief and vague, grew in number over decades. The place becomes part of the legend. Lake Superior's graveyard of the Great Lakes, with cold depths and long winters, is a stage that amplifies absence. The schooner hull, the icy horizon, the snow squalls, those are the scenery where Bannockburn may reappear. Observers described her silhouette drift across the waves, then vanish as though swallowed. The cold waters mirror her shape in mist. The isolated stretch between Isle Royale and Keweenaw becomes her haunting ground. Archive historians dig through shipping registers, insurance ledgers, search reports, lighthouse logs, collision reports, weather logs. They confirm her manifest, her profile, the sighting from the Algonquin, the lack of wreckage, the presser that a life preserver was retrieved. But they also find large gaps. No distress signals were recorded, no radio calls, she lacked radio. No hull evidence ever surfaced. The lake bottom in many suspected zones is too deep and poorly charted for early searches. The disparity between myth and archive is wide. The legend adds bones on deck, warnings from ghostly lights, phantom passages. The archival record offers only a ship that vanished in a storm, with minimal debris and no survivors. The haunting tales depend on memory, atmosphere, reports decades after the fact. But that doesn't stop them. In some ghost reports, a freighter captain on a modern ship sees a blinking light ahead, slows, changes course, but sees no wake, no structure when reaching the spot. Others at night claim to see the Bannockburn hull ghosting past their bow in snow squall, then dissolving behind them. A few fishermen say they heard bells or whistles in the storm, but no ship near. Whether misidentification of passing vessels, optical illusions, or memory overlay, such stories endure. The cold lake is her tomb, but also her theatre. Her presence is known by the absence of presence, a ship that might return in shadow. She comes in snow, in fog, in lightning reflection, in the wash of waves on dark nights. Her ghost is woven of vapour, rumour, and the lake's long memory. No confirmed salvage has ever turned up the Bannockburn. Modern sonar expeditions have reviewed deep zones, especially around Caribou Reef and shoal regions. Magnetic anomalies exist, but none have been pinned as her remains. Today's underwater vehicles search frequently, but Lake Superior's vast reaches defy certainty. The archive keeps her name. Mariners' reports, newspaper clippings, museum registries, scrap catalogues, insurance records, these maintain her existence. The myth keeps her return. The place, the cold wide lake, holds her still. Her outline flickers in memory. Her lights drift between storms. Bannockburn sails again in shadow on the Great Lakes. SS Kamloops, 1927. The wind shrieks over Lake Superior, snow hisses in ribbons. Deep beneath those dark waters lies the SS Kamloops, a freighter turned tomb and legend, frozen in time yet alive in diver lore. The Kamloops was a Canadian lake freighter built for the canals and lakes. She measured about 250 feet in length, rated at around 2,226 tons, with a triple expansion steam engine and Scotch boilers. Her trade, package freight, machinery and general goods between Canadian ports. She was built to move cargo late into the season, risking ice and storm to squeeze more runs from the year. In late November and early December 1927, Kamloops set out on what would become her final voyage. On December 1st, she cleared Port Colborne, Ontario, entered Lake Huron, then navigated the Sault Ste. Marie Canal on December 4th, heading into Lake Superior. Her cargo included varied goods, machinery, wire, coal, leather items, crates of food. By December 5th, a powerful storm bore down on Superior, temperatures plunged, wind whipped from the north. Ice began forming rapidly on the hull, rigging decks, wind strengthened into gale force. Several ships delayed or anchored. Kamloops pressed on. On December 6th, she was last seen steaming toward the southeastern shore of Ile Royale, coated with ice. After that, she vanished. Search operations began December 12th, focusing on the Keweenaw Peninsula and Ile Royale's shores. But heavy seas, ice and cold delayed efforts. By April 1928, searches resumed. In May, several bodies washed ashore near 12 o'clock point on Ile Royale. Men wearing life preservers marked Kamloops. In June, more bodies were recovered. Parts of a lifeboat, fragments of superstructure and cargo debris washed up. But no hull, no logbook, no clear record of how she sank. For decades, Kamloops was one of the Great Lakes' great mysteries. Missing with all hands, no hull found, no answer. Then, in 1977, 50 years later, sport divers found her. On August 21st, in water about 195 feet deep, the wreck was located off 12 o'clock point. She lies on her starboard side, with much of her hull intact and cargo still in her holds. The dive history offers both clarity and mystery. Divers later observed the engine telegraph set to finished with engines, suggesting the power plant was no longer operating at the end. One assessment surmises that a ventilator or guy wire from the smokestack may have snapped during the storm, toppling the stack and damaging vital systems, cutting off funnel draft. With no exhaust stack, the boilers couldn't operate, and the ship went dead in the water during a violent storm. Drifts then pushed her into Ile Royale's rocky reef, where she took heavy damage and sank. In the map room of submerged charting, drift models show she likely sank close to Ile Royale, influenced by storm-driven waves, winds, and currents. The wreck lies near the underwater slopes off the northern edge of the island, on a ledge where depth drops steeply. Her bow is embedded in the lakebed slope. Her stern rests above more level ground. Rocks, shoals, and shallow reefs lie near that zone. The likely path she took seems to have carried her broadside into a reef before sinking to her resting spot. From the place's character view, Kamloops becomes part of Lake Superior itself. The ice, cold, depth, pressure envelop her. The cold fresh water acts as nature's refrigerator. At such depths, bacterial activity is suppressed. Wood, leather, fabrics, even cargo remain remarkably preserved. Divers have reported seeing crates of lifesavers candy, toothpaste tubes, machinery parts, wooden barrels, wire fencing, items left undisturbed for nearly a century. Within the wreck lurks Old Whitey, one of the ship's crew, whose remains remain lodged under a stairway in the engine room. Because decomposition is stunted, his body is preserved in a soap-like substance called adipocere. Divers sometimes say that his pale body seems to move or follow them, carried subtly by currents or refraction. Some even claim that on entering the engine room, they glance and see him sitting or standing in dim light watching. Others say he reaches out or follows divers through the wrecked hull. These stories blur lines between physical remains and ghost folklore. Diving accounts speak in hushed tones. One diver describes turning a corner in the dark, seeing a pale form ahead and freezing in place until the shape recedes. Another says he felt a hand brush his shoulder in a narrow passage, though no one else was with him. Some dismiss these experiences as current eddies, light refraction, or hallucination under cold stress. Others regard them as real encounters with the preserved man. Grandpa, as some divers call him. Archive documentation doesn't confirm ghostly motion of bodies. The NPS and dive survey reports record the presence of human remains, but always treat them as static traces of tragedy. The telegraph setting and hull damage provide plausible engineering clues. The stock data, ship's registry, cargo manifests, weather logs, radio absence, there was none, search records, all exist. They reflect where she was, what she carried, how she might have failed, but not the sensations divers report. Those come from memory under pressure and shadow. Cargo in the holds tells subtler stories. Crates tightly lashed, machinery remained in position, contents still intact in some boxes. Newspapers, shoes, personal items were preserved. The stasis suggests the sinking was sudden, with little internal collapse or rampant water rush destroying the cargo placement. If flooding was slow, items might shift. Instead, they stayed. That implies either structural break, power loss, or sudden hull breach. In the maproom overlay, the wreck's orientation, location, damage patterns suggest she struck on her port bow, then slid broadside, taking on water rapidly through damaged shell plating. The sudden list, combined with icing and lost power, would offer little time for orderly abandonment. Divers' exploration corroborates where hull plating was cracked or torn just aft of the second cargo hold. Over time, underwater currents, seasonal thermal cycles, shifting silt and metal stress fractures slowly erode parts, but in the cold depths, change is glacial. The time capsule nature persists. The water is cold, the dark is deep, the pressure is constant. Kamloops rests, silent, unmoving, yet its presence is felt by those who enter. The place itself, the northern waters of Isle Royale, becomes her home. The slopes, the drop-offs, the silent cold, the weight of depth, the dark corridors, they define her. When divers flash lights through the dark, the ship, its corridors, the cold walls of Hull, all become part of place. And into this place, the preserved body of a man, the artifacts, the cargo, the skeletal remains, they all speak. Some divers say that the body, Old Whitey, seems to follow them because the cramped passage creates optical illusions. As one enters a tunnel, slight currents push the body in view again from another angle. Others argue that minute shifts in light or particulate movement may trick the eye. But among divers, tales of Grandpa's presence grew in tone and repetition. The dusky figure seen in peripheral vision, the shape sitting motionless as divers pass. Some fear that looking directly causes it to vanish. Folklore about the Kamloops mixes with fact. The wreck is real, the remains are real. The cargo, the hull, the orientation, real. The legends about motion, ghostly presence, reaching hands, unverified, anecdotal. But they belong to a community of divers who know the wreck, know the place, know the cold. In the silent corridors of Kamloops, a diver passes the boiler room, flashes a light at broken machinery. Pipes, levers, gauges, frozen in place. Havana crates of goods untouched. A pale body lies half hidden under rusted steel, skin waxy, intact. In that long, quiet moment, it's easy to feel that someone might rise. The ship is quiet, but the memory is alive. Kamloops is more than wreck. She's a vessel of memory, a submerged character in ice and metal. Her holds, her dim corridors, her preserved contents, her lingering corpse, all a part of her identity. Divers visit, document, marvel, and sometimes recoil. They leave behind light, breathe bubbles, then ascend to dark air. The cold water reclaimers resume their slow work. Kamloops remains, her story layered in place and in legend. Kaz II, 2007. A midday sun glints off sapphire waves as the Kaz II slips silently through coral reefs. It's April 2007, off Queensland's northern coast, and somewhere, on board or just beyond, something has gone horribly wrong. The Tremaran drifts, systems alive, but its three-man crew vanished. Kaz II had departed Airlie Beach on April 15th, bound for Townsville as the first leg of a longer circumnavigation of northern Australia. The crew, Derek Batten, 56, and two neighbours, Peter, 69, and James Tunstead, 63. They were not seasoned deep-sea voyagers, though Batten had trained and done coastal reef trips. 2 days later, on April 17th or 18, a surveillance helicopter spotted the yacht drifting 88 nautical miles off Queensland's northeast coast. The engines were running, the hull intact, the men nowhere to be found. Boundless questions ripple from that moment. Investigators arrived April 20th, boarding a vessel that looked as though its occupants had simply walked away. A laptop sat awake, charts and clothes neatly arranged, cutlery and plates laid for a meal. The radio and GPS systems remained functional, life jackets were stowed, a dinghy was still hoisted. The only outward damage, one sail badly shredded, and no signs of struggle. The anchor was up. Everything appeared normal, except human presence. In the radio room structure we track the last signals, or absence thereof. Kaz II had transmitted routine position reports early in her journey. One final known contact was at 6:45 p.m. on April 15th, giving a position near George Point. After that, silence. No panicked SOS, no distress call, no emergency broadcast. The radio remained live but unused. If life threatened, the radio did not speak, yet the craft was equipped for distress. Emergency systems were on board. The radio and GPS were in good order. A vessel in trouble, especially one with working electronics, would normally attempt a call for help unless the crew had no time. The absence of such calls suggests catastrophe or sudden paralysis. We moved to the cold case map room. Drift charts, route projections, current flows, reef maps. The region around the Whitsunday Islands and the Great Barrier Reef is complex. Tidal currents, reef corridors, seasonal squalls, narrow passages. Kaz II likely slipped off course into a reef channel or tangled with wind and tide in shallow waters. The shredded sail implies a violent wind strain, perhaps a sudden gust or squall. A rope trailing behind, captured in video, hints that something may have fouled the propeller or rudder, binding her motion or steering. Video footage recovered from onboard showed scenes from April 15th. Batten at the helm, Peter Tunstead fishing on the aft steps, calm seas, no jackets, seas choppy but not alarming. A long white rope trailed behind the boat. Fenders hung off both rails, the engine was not yet running in that clip. The reels of surrounding islands helped fix the position. The men even joked about threatening skies. But nothing in that footage suggests immediate danger. When authorities examined the vessel in Townsville, cabins were neat. A firearm and ammunition were found in Batten's sealed container, nothing missing. A drawer held an extra bullet. Cutlery lay in the galley sink. A plastic sheath of fishing knives sat untouched. That orderliness contradicts crash or panic. If calamity struck, it happened fast, without time to disorder the place. In the map room overlay, models of current and wind suggest that from the point she became disabled, Kaz II drifted east-northeast with the current for days, 3 knots or less, moving through reef corridors and open sea until spotted. The path would avoid most shipping routes, putting her in remote reef waters where few boats roam. Investigators considered various scenarios. One proposes a fishing line fouling the propeller. Perhaps one of the men leaned overboard to free it, slipped, fell. A second went to help and Batten left the helm to drop sails. Wind shifted. The boom jibed and struck him, knocking him into the sea. With the vessel still under power, it drifted away, leaving all 3 in water they could not reboard. As the coroner later put it, once they were in the water, the end was swift. None of them were strong swimmers, seas were choppy, exhaustion would set in quickly. The coroner's inquest in August 2008 probed these possibilities. He acknowledged he could not conclusively define what happened. But his preferred theory aligned with this cascade of misadventure. A man overboard, rescue attempt from deck, boom strike, sudden drift. The lack of bodily remains, the intact vessel, the orderly interior all point away from foul play. The report ruled out staged disappearance or third-party boarding. Still, many open gaps remain. Why were life jackets unused? Why no call for help? Why did the men not tether themselves or deploy safety lines in known rough areas? Some argue that they may have overestimated calm. Some wonder whether seas or wind shifted faster than expected, giving no reaction window. Some speculate that the long rope trailing behind may have caused drag and sudden capsize risk. Maproom reconstructions of reef charts show that the boat may have drifted near reefs and shallow shoals not well charted, possibly grazing coral and jolting the hull or steering. That impact could have caused sudden motion or snapped rigging, contributing to disarray without visible hull breach. Yet the forensic examination found no obvious hull damage beyond the sail. The cold case record also records that a fishing vessel crew, Gillian, claimed to see a white yacht drifting sideways among reefs near Bowen on April 16, about 2 days before the official sighting. They came within 50 metres but saw no one on board. Seas were shallow, reefs dangerous, the boat drifting without direction. That grounding possibility overlaps with the drift path models. But the clean interior remains the strangest aspect. A cup of coffee sat half full, cutlery ready, charts laid out, clothing piled. The boat looked like it had paused briefly, not catastrophically. The engine was idle but capable. The missing crew left no sign of violence. The sail shredded, but the ship did not sink or founder. It drifted. In radio silence and clean cabins, the mystery lingers. The vessel is both a witness and an actor. Engines idling, systems alive, drifting in open sea with no human presence. The geography of reef channels makes drift dangerous and unpredictable. The map room suggests where she moved. The ship allows scrutiny, but we have no audio logs, no eyewitnesses beyond video, no bodies. CAS-2 remains adrift between what is known and what is unknown. Its signal is its silence. Its hull is a stage for absence. The radio room beckons lack of call. The map room outlines drift patterns and reef hazards. The boat continues to speak in its mechanical hum, its charts, its ordered artifacts, while its crew remains lost to sea. Tai Ching 21, 2008. Late October 2008, somewhere in the vast Pacific north of Fiji, a Taiwanese fishing vessel falls silent and is later found ablaze, empty and drifting. The ship is Tai Ching 21. Her fate blends fire, disappearance, and a void where human voices should be. Tai Ching 21 was a longline fishing boat, about 56.96 metres long, registered under the Taiwanese flag, and manned by a multinational crew of 29, 16 Taiwanese, 6 Indonesians, and 4 Filipinos. Her mission? To fish in distant waters, following lines of tuna or other pelagics. The last verified radio contact came on October 28, 2008. After this point, silence. No distress call, no mayday. Observers, authorities, and tracking logs detect nothing more. Weeks later, on November 9th, she's found, adrift near Kiribati, gutted by fire. Her lifeboat and 3 life rafts are missing. The deck is scorched, interior charred. No crew, no bodies, no signal. Investigators and naval authorities launch an extensive search. The US Air Force C-130 scans 21,000 square miles north of Fiji. New Zealand Air Force P-3. Orion scours Pacific expanse. Ships climb in and out of search grids. They look at nearby islands, scattered reefs, floating debris. The tracks fade. No survivors found. In the radio room structure, we map out what she transmitted and what she didn't. Her last message is a routine position report. No signs of threat, no plea for help, no code indicating fire or abandonment. After October 28th, radio silence. The failure to broadcast an emergency signal suggests a catastrophic event or sudden affliction. Fire spreading too fast, communication systems disabled, crew evacuation before radio shutdown. The radio silence raises questions. Was the fire internal or external? Was it sudden? Did it begin below decks near wiring or fuel stores? Did it disable the radio first? Could the crew have escaped to life rafts before any broadcast? The fact that the life rafts and lifeboat are missing hints they may have been deployed, but if so, where did they travel? No one saw them return. No distress radio bursts were registered. We turn to the cold case map room, modelling drift, current, wind, fire timing, positioning, and probable exit paths. The Pacific currents in that region around Kiribati are strong. The equatorial countercurrent, trade winds, seasonal shifts, eddies, wave patterns all shape drift. The burned hull of Tai Ching 21 is found in a spot consistent with several days of passive drift, though her fire would have disabled propulsion early. Overlaying charts, the likely scenario: fire begins in mid to late October, the crew evacuates, taking life rafts, the ship continues to drift eastward under residual momentum or lighter wind push, hull charred, smoke cleared, then eventually it is spotted. The path crossings, reef islands, remote atolls all fall in the drift zone. The life rafts may have moved off course, sunk, or carried men far from reach. Deck condition. This derelict craft shows signs that the fire consumed most superstructure and interior spaces. Burn patterns suggest it wasn't a surface blaze only. Fire penetrated compartments. The absence of hull breach visible from above suggests the structure held sufficiently to float through the fire. But heat, smoke, wiring damage, and suppression systems, if any, would have failed early. The missing life rafts, 3 rafts and a lifeboat absent from the ship strengthen the idea that crew left the main hull. If they launched rafts, they had time to start evacuation. But if fire or smoke overwhelmed them, they might not have had enough time to broadcast distress. The question: did they board life rafts in calm seas or turbulent motion? Did they drift away, perish, or reach islands? Searchers found no trace of survivors, bodies or rafts. Logbooks, navigational charts, and internal records are gone. When authorities boarded, the holds were empty, charred out. The instrument room is gutted. No ship's logs to reconstruct decisions or timelines remain. This absence magnifies the unknown. The radio record ends before the fire incident, and no alternate logs were recovered. Archival registries show Tai Ching 21's last known position and business details. The Taiwanese Maritime Authority records her last radio message and the crew manifest. Insurance and shipping logs confirm her cargo permits, vessel age and readiness. But no prior record suggests notable risk. Nothing in her maintenance records shows notable hazards, though small vessels in remote waters often have maintenance gaps. One theory is that a fire broke out, possibly in engine rooms, fuel lines, wiring circuits or galleys, and spread faster than crew could respond. Smoke may have disabled visibility. The crew may have gone topside into rafts, abandoning the hull before harnessing cameras or radio. Without time, no distress calls were made. Fire on a vessel, especially in remote seas, can escalate quickly from manageable to uncontrollable. Another possibility: the fire was externally induced. A lightning strike, a fuel leak explosion, or collision with flotsam causing sparks. If lightning struck communication arrays, the radio might have gone dead before the crew could send help. But no storm reports or radar logs confirm a lightning strike in that region at that time. From the map room, drift estimates show that the burned hull moved east or slightly southeast of her last known location, at rates consistent with trade winds and surface currents. The hull was found near the Phoenix Islands, which lie along plausible drift paths from where the ship might have been disabled. Islands are sparse in that region. Survival rafts may have missed landfall or been carried far off course. In one account, local Kiribati fishermen reported sighting a sickly smoke on the horizon days before November 9th, but they assumed it was a volcanic or burning island. No direct report mentioned seeing men or rafts. Such sightings often go unshared or unconnected. The time gap between her last radio call, October 28th, and discovery, November 9th, spans 12 days, enough time for fire, drift, across remote stretches, and gradual death for any survivors in rafts. The Pacific is unforgiving. Exposure, dehydration, currents, predators all threaten small boats. The absence of life signals suggests none survived long after abandoning hull. The burned hull was towed back to Taiwan after recovery. Examination revealed charred decks, no internal fixtures intact, instrument rooms destroyed, wiring melted, structural warping. The hull shell showed no catastrophic breach. Water ingress seems post-fire and slow, consistent with drift in damaged but floating state. The superstructure was mostly gutted. No bodies, no life rafts, no survivors. The human story ends in silence. The ship drifts, charred, voiceless. The radio room, once a place of signal and life, fell silent before catastrophe. The map room tracks her drift but can't trace human paths. The hull drifts alone. Tai Ching 21 is both wreck and warning. The burnt hull drifting in remote waters, bearing mute testament to a crew lost without trace. The radio silence, the lost life rafts, the destroyed logs, all deepen the void. The Pacific holds her secret in burning drift and empty decks. High Aim 6, 2002. A pale dawn breaks over tropical seas. The horizon is empty, save for a lone fishing vessel drifting silent. Its engines idle, its crew vanished without a trace. That ship is High Aim 6, a mystery of radio silence and cold drift. High Aim 6, also known by its Chinese name Haiyan Liu Hao, left Luqiu, Taiwan on October 31, 2002, destined for fishing grounds far out in the Pacific. She flew under Indonesian flag, manned by a crew mix of Taiwanese and Indonesian fishermen. She was a long-line fishing vessel carrying gear, provisions, and the steady expectation of returns at season's end. Her radio record remains one of the slender threads in this mystery. The owner maintained contact with the ship's captain in December 2002. After that, the vessel went silent. No distress calls, no mayday. On January 8, 2003, she was found drifting off the west coast of Australia, some 80 nautical miles east of Rowley Shoals, without a soul aboard. The motor was running. She was under power when first sighted. When boarded days later, the engine was dead, the rudder locked. In the radio room structure, we track her last signals and her silence. Her radio traffic before disappearance shows normal position reports, routine check-ins, no mention of strife, no signals for help. The moment she goes missing, the radio goes dark, a silence that speaks more than it hides. No emergency broadcast intercepts, no attempted calls. It suggests that if calamity struck, it likely occurred suddenly, or in a way that disabled communications instantly. When boarded, forensic examiners found the vessel largely intact. Personal effects remained. 7 toothbrushes were still on board. Food and water stores were undisturbed. There was no sign of struggle, no forced entry. The gear was untouched. Fuel was abundant. The fish hold contained decaying catch, showing she was operating as intended, not carrying illicit cargo. No lifeboat signs, no torn rails, no broken windows. The vessel had been sighted in motion before boarding. On January 3rd, 5 days before boarding, she was observed with her engine running, drifting under some force. That suggests she was still functioning, at least mechanically, for some period. But by the time inspectors came aboard, the engine was dead and the rudder locked. Either auto-fail, mechanical breakdown, or sabotage. Phone records add another layer. The engineer's cell phone, Lin Chung Lee, was used after the ship's disappearance. Between January 1st and January 10th, 87 calls were made from his phone in Bali. That implies someone retained access to the vessel's cell connection, or that an off-board operator used the phone after crew departure. That fact complicates the story. Were some crew alive and travelling somewhere else? Or was the device removed? Authorities investigated mutiny. One Indonesian crew member, arrested later, claimed that on December 8th, some of the crew murdered the captain and engineer, then departed the vessel. He never fully explained motive. The vessel's contents contradict a hurried theft or escape. Clothing, personal items, tools remained. If mutiny, it was deliberately staged to leave no trace. In the cold case map room, we plot her drift, her possible path, and the uncertainties. The spot she was boarded is near the Australian exclusive economic zone, amid reef lines, ocean currents, wind lanes, and remote sea. Drifting from her last known operations area toward that spot would require days of passive motion. The engines may have carried her part of the way before failure or shut-off. Currents, wind push, and sea state may have nudged her course. Overlaying current charts and drift models, she could have drifted with the south equatorial current or been carried by Indonesian through-flows, entering Australian waters. The rough seasonal monsoon winds shift patterns. Her path crosses areas with few passing ships. That may be why no witness saw crew rafts. One theory is that early mutiny or conflict led to crew abandoning ship while allowing it to drift under engine power for days before shutdown. Another, mechanical failure incapacitated the vessel, and crew left under calm conditions, not expecting isolation. But that fails to explain the phone usage afterward. Or perhaps they were taken off, with device then phone used to reach back. Other theories: piracy or forced boarding, but no signs of violent entry, no damage. A rogue boarding is less likely. Piracy in that zone is rare, and pirates would extract value, not leave cargo. Illegal migrant smuggling was speculated but dismissed. The cargo hold had rotting fish, not hidden human cargo. The ship's interior being intact undermines chaotic scenarios. If crew abandoned quickly, why leave nearly everything? The lack of emergency distress suggests they expected the vessel to drift or survive temporarily. The phone usage implies some crew or associates had access afterward. In the map room's reconstruction of her last hours, suppose on December 8th mutiny occurred. Crew leave in rafts or lifeboats. The vessel, left under autopilot or engine momentum, continues drifting east. The rudder locks, engine eventually fails. The hull continues drifting slowly until spotted on January 8th. In that scenario, crew would have to either survive in rafts far from shipping lanes or have been picked up elsewhere. None were found. The radar AIS or marine traffic logs show no intercepts of life rafts or signals. No distress buoy activation. Searches covering thousands of square nautical miles yielded nothing. Bodies, rafts, none. The waters are deep, currents strong, predators, sun, exposure all combining to erase survivors. The mutiny hypothesis is still officially favoured by Taiwanese police, supported by phone data and one detainee confession. But the maritime forensic record provides no conclusive proof. There is no blood, no weapon, no sign of struggle on board. Thus, High Aim 6 remains a vessel adrift between radio silence and drift grids. Her radio spoke only of daily operations, then it fell silent. Her hull drifted, her crew vanished. The phone rang days later, echo of life beyond the hull. The path plotted in charts stops at the sea. The ship speaks in absence. Jianseng, 2006. Beneath an empty sky, a steel hull drifts alone in the Gulf of Carpentaria. No flag flies, no crew stirs. That vessel is Jianseng, a ghost freighter seized in 2006 whose origins remain unresolved and whose silence speaks louder than its engine ever could. In 2006, Australian Coast Watch aircraft spotted an 80-metre tanker drifting some 180 kilometres southwest of Waipa, Queensland in the Gulf. Its name was painted over and most identifying marks removed, but fragments of the name Jianseng still appeared under layers of fresh paint. The ship was under tow when discovered, according to reports. A broken tow rope trailing from the bow. No crew, no sign of struggle, no distress calls. When Customs Patrol vessel Storm Bay arrived, they found a vessel inert, engines dead, drifting slowly southwards. Officers boarded at dawn. Inside, they encountered compartments stripped bare. Navigation gear missing, electronic equipment gone, identifying plates removed. In contrast, large stores of rice remained intact, stowed in bulk. That rice led one hypothesis, that Jianseng acted as a resupply vessel, provisioning fishing fleets with food and fuel beyond Australia's exclusive economic zone. If so, her sheer anonymity might have been intentional. But why was she empty? The boarding party saw no signs of recent human activity. No footprints, no personal items left behind, no blood or damage consistent with violence. The ship's decks and holds showed weathering, not fresh plating work. The lack of equipment strongly suggests a slow stripping over time, not a catastrophic event. She had drifted long before detection. From the cold case map room lens, her drift becomes a silent story. The Gulf waters, under monsoon winds and seasonal currents, push vessels west, south, and east depending on wind regimes. Jianseng likely broke free from tow, then wandered under slow currents, guided by wave vectors, wind, and minimal residual momentum. Her route may span hundreds of kilometres before detection. The Gulf's channels, shallow banks and reef edges make navigation hazardous for drifting ships. Because she was found in shallow water relative to deep ocean, Australian authorities decided to tow her to Waipa, remove hazardous materials, then to scuttle her in deeper seas when no owner surfaced. That final act sealed her fate as a managed derelict, not a preserved wreck. Investigators reviewed registries, shipping records, maritime camera logs, radar sweeps, and AIS databases. They attempted to trace vessel registrations, past sightings, and ownership, but found nothing confirming her identity or origin. No nation claimed her. No missing ship alerts matched her description. The painted-over name and stripped plates made tracking impossible. One hypothesis: Jianseng was used covertly as a mothership for fishing operations distributing provisions or fuel to fleets operating illegally in remote waters. Once her usefulness ended, she may have been abandoned, stripped, and allowed to drift. This theory explains her anonymity and her large rice stores, but it fails to explain crew departure or why no records or manifest remain. Another possibility, she was being towed to scrapping or remote port conversion, but broke tow and drifted away. Under that scenario, the crew may have left the ship under controlled conditions, leaving no distress calls. But what caused them to abandon a nearly intact hull? Possibly damage to propulsion, fire, structural failure, or inability to navigate shallow reefs near coastline. From the MapRoom overlay combining tides, wind charts, and drift vectors, one can trace possible drift paths from known fishing zones north of Australia toward the Gulf. That suggests Sank may have operated north of Australia before drifting into the Gulf after tow failure. The broken tow rope suggests she was already being handled for relocation or support when released. No signs of hull breach were found. No evidence of collision or grounding under inspection. Her stripped condition argues long abandonment and consistent scavenging, perhaps over weeks or months. When found, she looked like an abandoned shell rather than a vessel lost in sudden disaster. In the place's character sense, Sank is both ghost and warning in Australian coastal waters. The Gulf of Carpentaria, its shallow seas and long shipping routes, became the stage for her drift. The vast waters allowed her to hide, to vanish from record, to cross boundaries unseen. She was carried by currents, shaped by wind, visited by customs but never claimed. Her anonymity became her identity. The stripped hull, blanked name, empty bridge, these are her signature. She is defined by what she lacks: crew, identification, origin, continuity. In maritime law, she stands among vessels that speak through absence. When authorities scuttled her, they removed the last chance to study hull context, as deep-sea preservation would have allowed measurement, analysis, perhaps clues. But in practice, hazard and law overrode mystery. The scuttling in deep water removed her presence from surface charts. She drifts now only in reports, maps, speculation. Over the years, the Sank has become a ghost story in Australia. Maritime blogs, local news, curious sailors mention the ghost tanker that came from nowhere, carrying rice, stripped bare, with engines dead. But the official record remains slender. No proving her origin, no survivors, no manifest. The ship drifts now only in charts and memory. Her shape, her profile, her empty holds, these become clues and questions. The waters that carried her forward now swallow her past. The drift map ends where the scuttling began. Her story remains open, a vessel without birthplace, a vessel without people drifting between currents and silence. Lyubov Orlova, 2013. A cold wind blows across the North Atlantic. Somewhere in those grey waves drifts a ship once travelled by explorers and tourists, now without crew, named after a Soviet film star, the Lyubov Orlova. She is a ghost in the making. Lyubov Orlova was built in 1976 in what was then Yugoslavia, for the Soviet Far Eastern Shipping Company. She was ice-strengthened, intended for polar and expedition cruises, operating in Antarctica and the Arctic under various charter companies. Her hull was classed to resist ice. Over years, she carried passengers among ice floes, a vessel of beauty and danger. By 2010, her fortunes declined. In September of that year, she was seized in St. John S., Newfoundland, Canada. After her charterer claimed she owed $251,000 in unpaid fees, and her crew had not been paid for months. With finances in chaos, she remained tied up in harbour, idle and deteriorating. In 2012, she was sold to Neptune International Shipping and prepared for tow to the Dominican Republic for scrapping. In January 2013, the tug Charlene Hunt took her under tow. But the next day, the tow line parted in stormy seas. The tug crew struggled to reattach, but 35 kilometers per h winds and 3-meter waves thwarted them. Thus, Lyubov Orlova broke free, left to drift. On January 31st, a supply vessel, Atlantic Hawk, regained control and towed her away from oil platforms. But once she drifted beyond Canadian waters, Transport Canada decided to cut her loose, deeming her no longer a risk to installations. They released her to the sea, into international waters, where her final course would be shaped by wind and current. In MapRoom terms, her drift path is hauntingly broad. After being set free, She was located February 4th, about 250 nautical miles east of St. John-Auxerre, drifting northeast. 2 EPIRB distress signals, emergency beacon activations, were later registered, February 23rd and March 12th. Those beacons activate when immersed in water, so many believe she sank. Before that, satellite tracking placed her some 1,300 nautical miles off the Irish coast on February 23rd. Media reports speculated she might be heading toward Great Britain or the Iceland region, yet no confirmed reappearance occurred. Her drift corridor might have carried her along ocean currents toward Europe or into deeper Atlantic. Myths swarmed around the ship. In early 2014, tabloids inked stories about her being rat-infested, about the rats turning cannibal, about her reaching the UK coast, bringing plague. Headlines evoked ghost ship and floating horde of cannibal rats. Experts, however, rejected much of that. The rat stories were sensationalism without evidence. No credible reports confirmed infestation. No evidence of rats surviving so long in open sea. In the archive, the documented chain is clearer. The Canadian authorities' involvement, the tow breakup, the Atlantic Hawk intervention, the decision to cut her loose, all are recorded. Her registry was struck off, her ownership lapsed, her systems were likely offline. EPIRB signals suggest she may have flooded or sank sometime after drift, but no formal salvage or recovery of wreckage has been confirmed. The archives also document her prior career, her Antarctic cruises, her refits in 1999 and 2002, her grounding at Deception Island in 2006, when she ran aground and was pulled free by a Spanish icebreaker, and her seizure in St. John's Cess. These records anchor her in history. The ghost tales rest upon that anchor. In the myth versus archive tension, the beacons and sightings are the threads of truth. The rat legends, the landfall rumours, the wild trajectories, they are embellishment. Experts assert the most likely scenario. She gradually sank in deep water after long drift, buoyed until eventual flooding overwhelmed her. The EPIRB activations support that, but because no wreck has been confirmed, she remains missing. In the MapRoom overlay, drift models show a plausible path east into the mid-Atlantic, under influences of the North Atlantic drift, prevailing westerlies, gyres. From near Newfoundland, she could have sailed by current toward Europe or sunk along the way. The time between breakaway and EPIRB signals suggests she maintained flotation for weeks. The ocean may have claimed her when hull fatigue, storms, or flooding overcame her. Her presence becomes a phantom in currents. The Atlantic, cold and wide, becomes her corridor. Her hull is silence. The ocean becomes stage and sea room. Her drift path is a ghost line drawn on charts. When people speak of Lyubov Orlova today, they speak of vanishings, of signals, of drift. The myth of rats, the tales of landfall, the alarm in tabloids, all surround the silence. The archive constrains what can be believed. The myth fills what cannot be explained. The sea carries her still, or claimed her. Her ghost is in drift, in beacons, in absence. RMS Queen Mary, Long Beach. A great liner sits silent in Long Beach Harbour. She once cut across oceans, now she holds still, anchored to land yet floating. Her steel ribs creak in coastal wind. That ship is RMS Queen Mary, a grand ocean liner turned hotel, museum, and magnet for ghost stories. Queen Mary was commissioned by Cunard in the 1930s, built in Scotland and launched in 1934. Her first voyage set sail in 1936, heralding a new age of luxury transatlantic crossings. She carried passengers in elegant lounges, grand staircases, formal dining halls. During World War II, she was converted into a troop ship, earning the nickname Grey Ghost for her speed and stealth. After decades of crossings, she was retired in 1967 and permanently moored in Long Beach, California, where she became a stationary hotel and tourist attraction. In her transformation from seagoing vessel to static icon, Queen Mary took on a new identity. She became part ship, part building, part haunted domain. Floors that once felt the motion of waves now feel the rumble of coastal traffic. Corridors echo with footsteps, whispers, the shuffle of guests. The ship is place, memory, and rumour. Many visitors and staff report eerie experiences aboard her decks. One of the most famous haunted spaces is room B340. Guests report faucets turning on and off by themselves, lights flickering, shadows crossing the doorway. Some say they felt a presence enter the room overnight, only to vanish by morning. The room also carries stories of a supposed past death there, but detailed archival evidence of a murder remains unconfirmed. Another focal haunt is the first-class swimming pool. A young girl, often called Jackie, is said to appear in reflections on the tile walls or move along the pool's edge. Several guests claim to have seen a little girl in a vintage swimsuit gaze upward, then disappear when approached. The pool is no longer operational as a swimming facility, but its quiet hall, mosaic tiles, and dark water make it a stage for spectres. In the engine and boiler rooms, staff and guiding tours often hear footsteps, mechanical hums when systems are off, and sense cold spots. The lower decks, dim, narrow walkways, steel bulkheads, pipe runs, are frequent subjects of ghost stories. Doors creaking, tools moving, whispers behind racks. These places once roared with power, now they harbour echoes. Queen Mary operates formal ghost tours, haunted encounters, paranormal ship walk, and graveyard tours. Guests are led into hidden rooms, lower decks, boiler rooms, and neglected passageways during after hours. Tour guides weave stories of apparitions, residual energy, creaking doors, and historic incidents. Her official site describes these as captivating legends of the paranormal residents who now call the ship home. But how many of the ghost tales align with documented history? The archives show that over the liner's service life, around 49 to 55 deaths are recorded on board, mostly from natural causes, accidents, illness, or wartime incidents. No confirmed records exist of murder aboard. Many haunt stories involve amplified memory, conflated events, or hearsay. One well-documented tragic event is the collision in 1942 between Queen Mary and HMS Curacoa, when Curacoa was sliced in two. Some crew of Curacoa are rumoured to haunt Queen Mary's decks, but Queen Mary's logs show she was escorting troop movements. She did not sink herself. The legends build on shared tragedy, not direct culpability. The legend of Door 13 is also often cited. It's said that Door 13 is never used because its threshold vibrates with spectral footsteps or unhappy energy. Some guides claim technicians refuse to walk through there alone, but ship layout changes over years mean original door assignments have shifted. The archives don't clearly identify a Door 13 associated with a known event. When staff began promoting ghost tours in the 1980s, some local historians suggest the haunting stories were emphasized to increase visitor interest. Nonetheless, the stories have taken on life of their own. Investigators skeptical of ghost claims point to pareidolia, seeing patterns in random visual stimuli, illusions in dim lighting, and the mind's tendency to project meaning onto creaks and drafts. A useful way to think is, Queen Mary is both stage and actor. Her corridors, rooms, pipework, history, and architecture become environment for ghost tales. The place itself shapes how people perceive anomalies. Shadows in curved hallways, cold drafts in old ventilation shafts, resonance of footsteps in metal halls. The ship's scale and isolated corridors amplify anxiety and attention. Furthermore, some haunt reports echo known ship incidents. For instance, a crew member once died in Hatch 13, crushed by a watertight door. People report whistling or running footsteps near that hatch even today. But the archives confirm that fatality, though ghost reports are not in original incident documents, they are later additions. Room B340's ghost stories are intriguing. Some claim a person was murdered there. The Sci-Fi article notes that the room is offered at premium rate and has had sightings inscribed on walls. But the official logs do not record a murder there. The stories may arise from fear, rumour, or guest retellings over time. Guests on recent overnight ghost tour stays report motion sensors tripped without movement, shadows in corridors, voices in static on audio equipment. A People magazine account describes investigators hearing a voice say 90 through static despite headphones blocking direct sound. A guest saw movement behind frosted glass in a corridor. The security logs showed no access. Whether those are paranormal or misinterpreted device glitches, mechanical hums, or reflections is contested. Queen Mary also hosts Dark Harbour, a seasonal Halloween event turning the ship and harbour area into haunted mazes and shows. The event draws on her ghost reputation, with themes referencing ghost tours, pool haunts, engine room shadows, and room B340 lore. The ship becomes backdrop and participant in the spectral narrative. From the archive side, historians note that the vast majority of deaths aboard Queen Mary were natural or accidental, not violent. The ship's logs, medical records, crew registers catalogue illness, collision damage, wartime stress. Deaths of crew from heart attacks, crew accidents, or illness are documented. But ghost tales often weave in violence and vengeance narratives not in logs. Thus, the ship's identity is dual, a documented historical liner with real deaths, structural incidents, and war service, and a haunted icon whose ghost stories may exaggerate or rewrite history. The place shapes perception. In cracked tile mosaics, echoing halls, cold drafts under steel plates, guests feel history and mystery merge. Queen Mary's corridors whisper. Her ceilings, bulkheads, piping, stairwells, they hold the weight of memory. A visitor walking the promenade deck at dusk may feel a presence behind them. A guide in dim, lower passageways may pause at a door that creaks shut. The ship becomes alive in mind, body, and architecture. In that space, the line between haunted and historical blurs. Queen Mary's legends persist not because they are proven, but because she is built to receive them. Her scale, her past, her isolation, her retention as a vessel, all invite spectators, believers, skeptics to meet in her corridors. The ghost tours, the legends, the archives, they all breathe through her hull. She remains not just museum ship but haunted stage. USS Hornet, CV-12. Steel decks flicker quietly in the coastal fog. The outline of a massive warship looms, her towers and flight deck looming like guardians of memory. This is USS Hornet, CV-12. Once a roaring wartime carrier, now a museum ship whispered to host unseen visitors. Hornet is an Essex-class aircraft carrier launched in 1943, serving in World War II and later recovering the Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 astronauts. Today she rests at Pier in Alameda, California, open to the public as the USS Hornet Sea Air and Space Museum. But among the aircraft displays and naval exhibits, stories persist. Strange footsteps in empty corridors, voices in dark hangar bays, lights flickering when no one is near. Visitors, staff, overnight investigators claim that Hornet has a life beyond her hull. One longtime volunteer recalls walking under the flight deck at night. He turned a corner into a passageway and saw a shape, brief, muted at the far bulkhead. When he approached, it vanished around a corner. He returned with others. The area was empty. That story is catalogued in a Ghost Stories collection about the ship. Another report. On a late shift, staff in the ship's galley heard pots rattling above them in compartments closed to public tours. When they climbed aft, the rooms were dark, silent, and locked. Nothing showed on cameras or logs. Those who tell the tale insist they felt that Hornet was still in motion. In the place's character view, Hornet's structure becomes a host. Her steel bulkheads, labyrinthine passages, maintenance tunnels, dim lighting, all provide terrain for perception. Hidden shafts, ducts, parallel passages, tight stairwells, deck plates, these are the spaces where reports cluster. The deck still seems vast and echoing, even in stillness. During special overnight ghost hunts and paranormal tours, investigators with EVP, electronic voice phenomena, record low signal voices and soft knocks. Some report lights blinking in closed rooms, control panels flickering whose systems are offline. In one such tour, a guide claimed that as the guests passed through the hangar deck, the metal walls hummed a high tone for a moment. Others felt chills, heard distant footfalls echoing in deep compartments. From an archival perspective, Hornet's naval history lends weight to stories. She saw battle, damage, crew losses, wear and repair cycles. Every ship that has weathered war accrues hidden scars, welds, patches, structural creaks. Hornet's skeleton still contains bulkhead corrosion, residual vibration paths, hollow zones. Systems turned off still cast residual electromagnetic fields, stray wiring shadows. The museum layout must also be considered. Some reports of apparitions occur in lost or seldom visited areas, in ladder wells, far below hangar bay, in boiler or engineering spaces closed off at night. Many witnesses admit fear and expectation. The ship's history conditions perception. The mind fills gloom with stories. One particularly repeated report, a man in a flight deck crewman muster area, around a red bulkhead door, heard a voice called 10 deck over, a naval reference. When he opened the hatch, no one was there. The room was empty. That report circulated among volunteer circles aboard the ship. In another case, a nighttime caretaker said he saw a flicker of motion slipping under the deck edge near the flag locker compartment, a dark silhouette crossing the corridor, retreating. By the time backup came, the walkway was empty, no footprints. Skeptics and structural staff note plausible natural causes, ship settling noises, metal expansion and contraction, HVAC airflow in sealed ducts, faint hums from ambient power, distant traffic vibration coupled through hull. A worker in metal suits once followed a report to a compartment, only to find that HVAC vents crate air pressures, doors shifting, causing the illusion of footsteps. Still, Hornet's sheer scale and heritage amplify small anomalies. The echo in a long passage, the low hum of a pump motor in adjacent compartments, the flicker of emergency lighting or cold air pockets in sealed areas, all can be misinterpreted in a ship that carries weight of memory. Public tours note that many observed phenomena cluster near midship, below flight deck, in forward hangar bay, or near crew passageways. That region was busy during operations, and now dormant. Its corridors are dim, with overhead steel frames and narrow rails. That same geometry intensifies humming, echoes, and atmospheric distortions, making any shadow seem alive. Of note, a community archivist compiled a comparison of the ship's death list. The number of crew lost over decades is not negligible, but most were lost in combat or natural incidents rather than shipboard accidents aboard this hull. None of the haunt tales point to a single tragic death location recorded in deck logs. Another volunteer account: in 2009, during painting of compartments, a volunteer separated from his group. In the labyrinth beneath hangar deck he wandered, came to a side passage, and encountered a voice calling, "Hey!" He paused. Moments later he found a dead end. He turned to return and saw a figure ahead, but when he walked closer, nothing was there. That story appears on a ghost story archive site. Whether those are illusions or real experiences is part of the tension. Hornet is both museum, naval artifact, and stage for perception. The place holds battles, life, death, voices, and empty corridors. Each creak, hum, flicker, shadow is caught between machinery and spirit. When nighttime groups explore, the ship becomes dynamic. Lights shut off, corridors glint, quietness pressurizes sound. A guide leads guests past lower decks, pointing to bulkheads where workers say they felt something pass behind them. A few guests say cameras captured orbs or motion streaks in long exposure. But skeptics caution lens artifacts. Hornet's identity lies in that tension. She is warship, museum, echo chamber, rumour crucible. Many will never be persuaded. Many will never forget. In her steel ribs and ghost walkways, Hornet carries both documented history and haunting possibility. In the hush of her decks, visitors often hear what they expect. Footsteps in the dark, voices in the void, presence looking on. UVB-76, the buzzer. In the silence of night, you tune your shortwave receiver to 4,625 kHz, and you hear it, a steady mechanical buzz repeating again and again. Buzz, pause, buzz, pause, 25 times a minute, day and night for decades. That is UVB-76, nicknamed the buzzer. It hums like a ghost in the radio ether. The signal has been logged since the late 1970s. Radio hobbyists first took note of it around 1982. What makes it strange is not just its persistence, but its interruptions. Occasionally the monotone stops, and a live voice in Russian reads code numbers or names. The voice is cold, clipped, precise. Then the buzzing resumes. No one has admitted responsibility, and no public documentation reveals why. In the radio room reconstruction, UVB-76 operates as a channel marker. The buzzing sound likely reserves the frequency, a signal that the line is open, owned, continuously claimed. The interruptions are the operative taps, bursts of voice codes that suggest remote communication with agents or units. Amateur radio logs show formats, call signs, 5-digit groups, code blocks. The messages follow fixed templates. Technically, the station uses upper sideband USB modulation, with the lower sideband suppressed, though on occasion full double sideband AM has been used. The tone cycles last approximately 2 seconds, pauses approximately 1.3 seconds, repeating tilde 21-34 times per minute depending on era. Earlier, buzzes were shorter, approximately 0.8 seconds. Sometimes, voice interrupts follow a monolith format. The station calls itself, or code names, then announces a string of ID groups and message blocks. For example, your UVB76 18008 Bromel 74 27 99 14, and a list of Russian first names. The content is cryptic, combinations of numbers and names, no full sentences or context. In the myth versus archive tension, many theories swirl. Some claim UVB76 is tied to Russia's dead-hand nuclear retaliation system, that as long as the buzzer runs, command and control is alive, and if the signal stops, it triggers launch contingencies. That scenario fits the Cold War fear narrative, but lacks public confirmation. Others propose UVB76 is simply a numbers station, a covert channel to send encrypted messages to spies or sleeper agents. The fact that the tone is continuous ensures constant coverage, and the voice bursts deliver payloads. But UVB76 differs from classic numbers stations in that the tone dominates. Messages are rare and irregular. Some technical analysts suggest alternative roles, testing ionospheric behaviour, sending a steady tone and measuring reflections, maintaining communications with Russian military units, meteorological or geophysical monitoring, or even simple keep alive signals to remote structures. None of these roles have been confirmed. The archive gives us some structural clues. The station was apparently located near Povarovo, just outside Moscow, in a facility known as the 143rd Communication Hub. That site is now abandoned. The call sign designation also shifted over time, from UZB76 to MDZB, then to ZHUOZ, then ANVF, and since late 2020 to NZHTI. These shifts may reflect administrative or organisational reassignments. The tone pattern changed slightly in 2010. Previously, the buzzer would lapse into a continuous alternating tone a minute before the hour. That is no longer common. Voice interruptions became more common, perhaps reflecting changes in use. From the map room of signals, one plots possible reception contours. At 4,625 Ka8s, shortwave propagates via ionospheric reflection. The buzzer can reach far across Russia, neighbouring states and beyond under suitable conditions. Listeners across Europe, North America and Asia have recorded and logged the signal, but the voice messages are often faint, sometimes distorted, sometimes overlapping background noise, making transcription and correlation tricky. One odd event. On November 3, 2001, a conversation in Russian, background voices, ambient speech, was heard behind the buzzer tone. That suggests the microphone may be live, or that a channel sits open. Some listeners speculate the buzzing is produced by a tone wheel or electronic oscillator near a microphone rather than a purely digital loop. Another oddity, in 2010, portions of the buzz were replaced with excerpts from Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. That musical interlude startled hobbyists. It seemed like someone hijacked or manipulated the tone. Later, pirated broadcasts of songs like Gangnam Style have been reported on the same frequency, possibly by signal intrusions. Even more curious, in 2022 hackers allegedly pushed images encoded in the signal's spectrum. Observers saw spectrogram patterns resembling digital content. Whether that was genuine or prank remains debated. Despite all speculation, the Russian military never publicly acknowledged the station's purpose. No official statement marks it as part of strategic command, ionospheric study, or spy network. The silence fuels rumour. To listeners, UVB76 becomes a radio haunt. Its tone is always there, invasive, constant, drone-like. When a voice interrupts, it feels like a ghost stepping into the room. Overnight, logs, spectrograms, audio archives build a memorial of unknowns. Its channel is a radio grave marker, presence without explanation. In the radio room, signals pulse, codes emerge, stories build. In the archive, registries and amateur logs fix tone patterns and voice blocks. Between them lie the blank spaces and there's functions unverified, purpose unrevealed. Listeners continue tuning, waiting for a voice, watching for silence. The buzzer endures. The ocean and the ether do not give up all their answers. Wrecks sink, signals fade, and crews vanish, but the questions remain. What is left is the silence, the echo, and the stories carried forward, reminders that some mysteries stay with us forever.